It's that time of the week. Yes, this week's Cult Movie Show, your weekly look at cult movies. Please welcome your hosts, Warren and Velvet.
Yes, welcome to another podcast of the Cult Movie Show, episode 49. And I am, of course, Warren, and with me, well, not with me as always, because we share this. We do this together. But of course, is my wonderful co-host, Velvet. How are you today, Velvet?
I'm doing quite wonderful as usual, and I'm really excited about today's show. I think it's going to be really fun. I already know this is going to go in a million different directions because that's kind of what our movies are doing in this episode.
Yes.
They're a little bit of everything, aren't they?
They are. It's I mean, definitely I can see a connection between two of them anyway. But
yeah.
Kind of different, sort of kind of different. So they'll be fun to talk about. So, I'm looking forward to that. But before we get started, what sort of week have you had, Velvet? Have you been sort of indulging yourself in the cinema arts, or?
I have actually. First, I'm actually going to start with television because I'm the only person left on the planet who's never seen an episode of Game of Thrones, and I know that it's just come to an end, and I'm like, okay, I got to get caught up on all the pop culture relevance that Game of Thrones has contributed to society. So I was debating the best way for me to start watching the series, and luck would have it, it was meant to be here in the mountains of Montana. They have those little DVD rental kiosks, and they've actually put the entire first season, of Game of Thrones is currently available in one of those rental kiosks. So I went ahead and snapped up the first season, and I plan on marathoning that this weekend. So because I didn't want to commit to buying a full disc, DVD set of a series I've never watched. But at the same time, I didn't really want to, I don't know. I was like debating the best way to do this legally. I wanted to, I was like, I could download it online for a fee, legitimately for a fee. But I don't know. I just came across this rental kiosk and they charge you $1.50 a day. And I was like, I could watch the entire first season in one day for $1.50. Sold. So
well, that's pretty
what
good.
My plans are later. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
And
I can't believe video kiosks. You've still got video kiosks.
Mountains of Montana.
There are a couple in the city that I live in, and I'll say that there are a couple in the city I live in. The city I live in, I think, has 5 million people, and there might be 2 or 3. They don't exist anymore. I think there's a handful of blockbusters that still exist. Probably for grandma and granddad, who still want to go off and rent something, I suppose, on Saturday night.
Right.
But yeah, they just don't exist anymore.
The area I actually live in, there's not a lot of people that actually have internet access. So a lot of them do actually rely on DVD rentals. And in the next town over, which is quite a ways away, there is actually a video rental place where you like old school Blockbuster, but it's just an old school independent place, and they get the most current DVDs available for rental. So it's definitely an old-fashioned thing here in the U.S. and definitely a small town. I don't want to say phenomenon, but small town culture. There we go.
Okay.
It's really common. Yeah, it's really common for you to find the actual physical mediums here because a lot of people have not crossed over to the internet.
well, one of the things I remember I used to love just before we all changed over to DVDs, which is kind of amazing now that we've even left that medium behind now. We're all digital, But but when that change was made from video cassette to DVD, one of the things I have to admit that I used to love about a video rental store was that you could walk through and see all these different things, and a lot of the VHSs were so old. They'd been there probably for 20 years or something, and always up in the back reaches, of the video stores were these dusty VHS copies of really appalling B-grade movies, really bad horror films, sci-fi films, and whenever you go in, there'd always be, you might go off and get, some latest film you just want to see, but then you'd probably walk out with 5 or 6 of these horrendous 1970s B-graders, I used to love that. I always thought that was so much fun, it's just...
I liked it too. Loved it. Huge part of my childhood was spent renting movies, and the best part as a kid was when you rented movies that you convinced your parents were for kids, and they totally were not. I mean, that's how I saw, like, the fucking Monster Squad and a couple other movies I probably shouldn't have been watching when I was a kid, but I had parental approval, so... That's the way that...
Well, I think the other thing, too, that was really fun about it was you could go out with your friends, or even if you were a child, you'd go off with your parents or something, and you'd be looking, and you were like a little kid in a candy store. What will I pick? What will I pick? Now it's just a little bit like, well, I can have whatever movie I want whenever I want. It's like it's a little bit like when you're a child and you really want a toy. Like, there's a particular toy that you just dream of, but you've got to wait till Christmas to get it. Because you don't have money, you just can't go off and buy something. And then you become an adult, and it's like, oh, yeah, I want that. I'll just go and buy it. And you lose a lot of that excitement,
Right,
and I think
exactly.
Going to the video store used to be a bit like that. There was the excitement of, what will I find? Like, what amazing stuff will there be, and and that's something I miss.
I remember, like, whenever, like, it's amazing how fast this all goes now, too, because I remember back in the day, when it was in the movie theater, it would take 6 months to sometimes a year before it would be available on VHS. And so I remember when Batman, like, I'd seen Batman in the theater and I could not wait for it to be in the rental store. And that was like 6 months later. And I remember, like, just an entire shelf being nothing but Batman VHS tapes, because everybody who wanted to watch it could go rent it, so it wouldn't be sold out. Like, they would accommodate that first, like, rush of the week when they first got the rental available. And then, like, they would start selling off copies and just leave, like, 1 or 2 copies in the DVD store or the rental place. And just...
One thing I remember too was that I used to live in an area of Melbourne, this is many years ago, which was a very big Chinese area. Like, probably half the people that lived in that suburb were Chinese. It was very heavily Chinese. And so it was all full of all the Chinese stores. The grocery stores, the restaurants, everything. So, but of course, it also had all the Chinese, in all the Chinese grocery stores, they used to sell movies. But if you remember VCD, when you used to get a movie.
I remember them trying to get that going in my local area, and that, like, lasted for 2 seconds.
It wasn't that popular outside of Asia. Like, if you lived in Asia, VCDs replaced video cassettes. But in a sense, in Western countries, you tended to, VHS had a longer life, and then DVD took over. You didn't have this flirtation with VCDs. But the beauty of it, if you lived in a Chinese area, is they used to get these movies out of Hong Kong that were literally put onto VCD the day the movie was released in the cinema. And you'd go into these grocery stores, and there you'd see this stuff that was still playing in the cinema. And it'd be like $15 to buy or whatever. So you go and buy it.
And that's cool. That's cool.
That was amazing. Cool. I used to love that. I used to absolutely love that. Of course, now it's just doesn't exist, but it was cool. I can still remember I was in a one of these Chinese grocery stores once. I call them grocery stores. They're more like a general store. They sell everything, just everything you can possibly think of.
Yeah.
And there was the movie section, and this little old lady walked up to me, and she sort of, I don't want to do the accent because it sounds terrible. Hello, I don't want to do it. It sounds racist. I don't want to do it. And
don't do it.
No, I know. Anyway, but she walked up to me. She goes, sort of, what movie are you looking for? And I says, I don't know. I just having a bit of a look. And then she started going through all the different genres. So she'd go, do you want horror? And then she'd do this scary face and put these claws out, with her hands. Or she'd go, do you want romance? And then she'd start and she started dancing in a circle. So every time she mentioned a genre, she'd actually act out the genre. It was absolutely hilarious. She was so sweet. That little old lady, I mean, she must have been about 70 or something.
And she just did not give a fuck.
No, it was so nice. So nice. And she was going through all of this in like this sort of broken English, you know. It was sort of like, it was just lovely. She was so sweet. And, but she was also great because she'd also go, no subtitles. You don't want that. No subtitles. So she was actually really helpful too. She was really good. Anyway, we are getting off topic before we even started.
Okay, really quick. I saw It, the new Stephen King version of It in the theater on opening night, and quick review. Go see it. Definitely,
you liked it?
Well done. Yeah, well done.
It?
Definitely go see it.
Were you disappointed that it's kind of only half the story?
I love that they did that. I think that's so much better because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, so much better because if they had tried to cram the entire story into a 2-hour film, it would have been so badly paced. It would have been way too quick. And they did a really good job of the pacing still rather quick, but you actually care about these kids. Like, for the most, you actually care about the kids, which is good. It was interesting. I took a family member with me, so it was good to take a family member with me because it turns out this family member had never seen the miniseries, the It miniseries from the 80s, or excuse me, actually 1990, I believe. And she actually did not understand the movie. So I was kind of like, oh, well, that's interesting. And now looking back, yeah, they don't tell you what Pennywise is. They don't give you an origin story. So I think they might be saving that for the sequel. So if you're not familiar with this movie, you actually, or the original like source material, you actually might not understand this movie. So I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize. I was like, you know, and now looking back at it, I'm like, oh, you're right. They really actually don't explain what Pennywise is exactly. You obviously figure out that he's eating kids, but yeah, it's really kind of a mystery what he is, why he's doing that, etc. But I really like it. The special effects are really great. I've heard some people complain about the CGI, which I also thought was interesting because I thought the CGI was really well done, but there's some people that evidently have a different eye for it, and they're complaining some of the CGI looked too fake. So it's definitely not a perfect movie, but it's definitely worth seeing in the cinema. So go ahead and check it out while you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I was a bit under the weather actually for several days this week, so I wasn't really out and about at all. It was a little bit too dangerous to go out and about in case something happened, if you know what I mean.
Right, exactly.
When you're feeling ill.
God. Yeah, exactly.
So I was sort of a bit housebound for a few days, but I did watch something I've been dying to watch. In fact, I talked to you actually about a little while ago because it's one of my favourite stories and characters, movie sort of and book characters that's been out there. I got to see the new Saint. In fact, if I've even got this loaded up on my phone, I don't know if it'll. So yes, I did actually go and watch this, or not go and watch the same, but watched it because there's the new movie out, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Although I think a lot of people are probably not going to like it because it's pretty much made for television, and it was kind of originally meant to be a pilot for a new movie. A new TV series of The Saint, which didn't get picked up, which is a real shame. So because of that, it's sort of shot for television. So some people might find it a bit slow, but I loved it. I just love everything Simon Templar. So and the amazing thing too is that there's been several people who have played the Saint on TV, but two of the old Saints play cameos in this movie, and one of them is Sir Roger Moore, his very last film appearance.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Ian Ogleby, who played the Saint in Return of the Saint, plays the really bad guy, and Sir Roger Moore plays the even more evil boss of the evil guy. So they both get to play villains, which was kind of cool to introduce the new Simon Templar. So it was, really loved it. Really loved it.
No, that sounds okay. I'll have to check that out. That does sound really cool.
Yeah, if you're into, I mean, I'll put it this way. If you're into the stories of Simon Templar, you'll love it. If you've never heard of Simon Templar and the Saint, you don't even know what I'm talking about, then you might find it a little bit boring. But if you're but if you're a fan of Simon Templar, if you've seen all the movies before, the TV shows before, and all the rest of it, give the movie a try. I think you'll really like it. So yeah, so that was something I was up to. But anyway, we're going to have a little bit of a talking point before we get into our movie reviews, and that's something that we talked about 2 weeks ago. We had a movie on that was like this, and we've got another one on this week, and that is cross-genre movies.
Yes.
How do we feel about cross-genre movies? You know, where we take two genres and put them together. What are your sort of general feelings about it, Velvet, before we maybe mention a few films?
I'm a huge fan of cross-genre films, but at the same time, I think sometimes the criticism that certain cross-genre films garner is that they try too hard to cram in one genre into another. So, like, obviously, we're going to be focusing mostly on the cross-genre Western today, which I think is a really fun genre. But sometimes, for example, I often say like comedy horror genre is often a hard genre to pull off because there's usually too much of one, not enough of the other for them to have a really good balance. But one of our favorites that we reviewed was Deathgasm, did that seamlessly.
Yes.
It's a very, very gory horror. There's actually jump scares, and it's actually really funny. So perfect horror comedy. Whereas something like Scary Movie is evidently more of a spoof horror comedy where it's just so silly and it's not scary at all. So it depends on how they balance the genres. There has to be that balance in order for a cross-genre to be successful, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think something like Scary Movie is... I don't really see something like that, or that franchise anyway, as being cross-genre. I see it actually more as just being parody.
It's definitely more of a spoof thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, they're just like spoofs, parodies, you know, as such. But but there is, but I suppose one to mention when you talked about horror comedy, Beetlejuice.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And that one's such a quirky film, too, because it's very funny, but the visuals in that are like straight horror. They're very, very, very strange. I don't think I found it scary as a kid. I don't know. But it's weird how that one became such a pop culture phenomenon. I mean, there was merchandise, there was a kid's cartoon, there was a video game. I mean, and really when you go back and watch this movie, again, this is one of those movies, this is not for kids, but for some reason, every kid saw it and kids loved it. I mean, no, because they have a brothel in there. They have him saying, I forget what he said. He calls somebody a bitch and grabs his crotch. I mean, that's not a movie for kids.
I know.
And also just the whole thing about Lydia Dietz, you know, Winona Ryder's character wants to kill herself in this movie. I mean, this is not subject matter for children, but it's hilarious. Kids love this movie, and parents let them watch it.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like Monster Squad, isn't it? You know, it's like
yes,
you know,
exactly.
You know, I mean, you can sort of see that. Yeah, it's sort of okay for kids, but then again, some of the things they talk about are the subjects are kind of taboo for children. You know?
Oh, totally not okay. I mean, blackmailing people by taking pictures of them without consent. You know, it's just like,
I know, you know.
Kids are killing people, killing monsters. I mean, you know, it's, again, I don't know. I guess it was supposed to be for kids, but really looking back, it's like, oh my God.
I know. It's not like, you know, what was like the Goonies, which was like
Right.
It was like Indiana Jones for children. You know,
right? Absolutely.
So the kids could literally put themselves into that concept of going through this great adventure, and there'd be baddies chasing them and whatnot. But in a sense, those sorts of movies have been made forever. You know, movies made directly for kids, and there's a baddie chasing them. They might know a secret, or you know, or something, and the adults don't believe them, and you know, blah, all the rest of it. But Goonies, I think, just took it to a new level. You know, it was It was a fantastic film. I still think The Goonies is great, even though it's not a cross-genre film, but but I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, love the Goonies. Everybody loves the Goonies. Another cross genre, the one I like that tricks a lot of people because they automatically think it's going to be for kids, and as you and I have experienced, they're not always for kids, is the animation live action genre. So, of course, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yes.
We're dealing with cheating spouses potentially and murder, and you even see cartoons get killed. I mean, that's even as an adult, I found that really actually kind of disturbing. And then there's the movie Cool World. I remember I wanted to see that because I was like, oh, cool, it's a cartoon movie. But that, again, not a good movie, first off, but also just not a good movie for kids because it's all about Kim Basinger trying to seduce her way into being a human instead of a cartoon in, a cartoon world. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't seen it.
You're not missing anything. It's horrendous. It has Brad Pitt in it, Gabriel Byrne, and Kim Basinger, and it's this whole cartoon world trying to cross over into the human world. It's actually really terribly made. It's actually really bad. Unfortunately, nobody remembers it because it's horrible. But again, it was one of those I couldn't wait to see as a kid, and then I saw it, and I'm like, whoa, this is not for kids.
That's a shame because I like Gabriel Byrne. I think he's really good.
I like him too.
Yeah,
I like him too. He actually plays an animator that goes to jail for actually murdering his wife because she was cheating on him. And so the entire time he's in prison doing his time, he becomes obsessed with this cartoon he's drawing, which is Kim Basinger, and then because of his desire for that, he ends up falling into the cartoon world, and she tries to use him to get into the human world and become humans. I mean, the premise is good, but the fucking movie's terrible, unfortunately.
But I suppose it's like a lot of stuff where, going back to that idea with kids, it's like The Simpsons is great for kids, Family Guy isn't. Do you know? I mean,
exactly.
they're both very similar shows, but The Simpsons, it was made for a family audience, where Family Guy is made for the parents only. It's just that kids these days, I don't know, they probably know a lot more than kids 20, 30, 40, 50.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I suppose, but but I thought maybe just talk about a couple of very famous cross-genre films.
Definitely.
One of the most famous ones I can maybe think of is From Dusk Till Dawn. Now, now, of course, which is like a heist movie, which then turns into a horror vampire.
But then it becomes like a horror comedy because I could not take that shit seriously, but I love it. I like that movie.
But it's amazing how the movie it's like two movies put together. Like you've got the original story as it starts, and then they arrive in this roadhouse, and then it becomes a totally different movie.
It's actually interesting the way Tarantino did do that, because usually cross-genre films, they really try to get that balance and try to get that mix in there, where, like you mentioned, like the movie does, it starts off totally as a very serious, not funny heist movie, crime, murder, being on the run from the law, trying to get into Mexico. And then, once they get into Mexico, it becomes a fucking horror comedy vampire movie. And it's such a strong tone shift that the first time I saw this movie, I was like, is this for real? What happened? What? This movie totally changed. But then, I enjoyed the ride. I really liked that movie. And a lot of people I talked to feel the same way. The first time they saw it, they weren't really sure what to think of it. Now a lot of people are like, either you love it or you hate it. But it takes more than one viewing for you to get a full opinion on how you feel about that movie, because the tone shift is so sudden.
I know. I love it. I have to admit.
I do too.
I think it's, I just love that scene when Quentin Tarantino holds his hand up and there's the big hole through the center of his hand. And he literally, and the camera just looks through the hole. That's just, that's funny.
Yeah, it's just so bizarre. And Tom Savini, the world famous makeup artist / monster creator for films, is in that movie, and he plays this crazy character they're like, what's your name? Sex Machine. And you're like, wait, what? And he has a gun. He has a gun on his crotch that, and I'm like, wow, okay.
Oh dear, it's a good one.
Really fun movie. Really fun movie.
It is a good one. But of course, one of the movies that we in fact reviewed only 2 weeks ago was, of course, White Tiger. So we don't need to go into any real detail, but I think we both agreed, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, one of the best cross-genre films we'd seen for a very long time. Yes,
excellent. And it's also not a genre you see very often, because it was kind of like this war, politics, supernatural film, which was really interesting. And then this film was rife with symbolism, which, again, we also said you don't see in a lot of actual films nowadays. A lot of films are very literal. Obviously, they're not realistic. They're not real life, but they're very literal. And this film was rife with symbolism, and the supernatural stood for something. It wasn't just, oh, we have a ghost just to have a ghost. Like, really amazing movie. Yeah, White Tiger from Russia, definitely.
Oh, I think so, because the thing is that although there's not very many, because this was a mainstream movie, obviously we're talking about White Tiger, so there's not many cross-genre war horror, if you like, type movies out there. But in the B-grade world, there are shitloads of them.
We got Dog Soldiers, Dead Snow. Although Dog Soldiers, I wouldn't call B grade. That one's actually really good.
No,
Dead Snow,
that
I
was
can't
a cinema
stand
release.
that franchise. I
Dead
hate
Snow.
that franchise.
I know why you don't like it, Velvet.
That's just a personal preference. We don't have to go into it. It's just a personal preference.
I understand why you don't like it, but I actually think that they're incredibly good black comedies.
Okay.
And the second one too does. I like the first one is a just a black comedy or dark comedy.
Right.
I think the correct term is now. So is a dark comedy. The second one turns into full out belly laughs. You know,
I couldn't. But that's just me. No, but with Dead Snow, for those of you who are not familiar with the Dead Snow franchise, there's only 2 films right now. There's not a third one, is there?
Yeah.
Okay. It's Nazi zombies, so it's a very obviously anything that has Nazis in it automatically you associate with war and politics of some sort, evidently. So, but then for them to be Nazi zombies, I mean, all of a sudden you got the whole horror genre, and then obviously, as you've mentioned, they mixed in the comedy. So I don't care for this franchise, but I can understand why you do, and I respect that.
Oh yeah, it's look, it's as we said, not everyone's cup of tea, but if you're into dark comedies and you're not worried about you sort of I don't know. So I mean, it's kind of different. I think like in the first one, the Nazis are really hideous and horrible. In the second one, the Nazi zombies are hideous and horrible, but they're also kind of comic. They're not as serious as in the first one. But if you're going down to like other real B grade ones, it's like this cross genre of war and horror, or war and supernatural, war and ghosts, is really kind of common. You get a lot of it, you know, a group of soldiers cut off in a bunker to find it's haunted by soldiers, or, you know, dead soldiers, or, you know, there's the famous movie called The Keep, where a group of German soldiers were meant to be in Romania, I think it's meant to be, or Hungary, somewhere like that, during the Second World War, to find out that they're inside a castle that actually holds a supernatural spirit. So there's quite a lot of these sorts of ones, but I mean, The Keep was a mainstream movie, White Tiger was a mainstream movie, you know, Dog Soldiers was a mainstream movie, but when you get into the B grade world, shit, there's a lot of them. There really are. You know, I mean, I remember seeing one that was set in the First World War on the Western Front, and these soldiers occupy a trench only to find out that the trench is haunted. I mean, a haunted trench, you know, it's like,
wow.
Where some of these are
really scary. That actually sounds really scary.
Actually, this one is, because the dead keep coming back to life, and they're trapped because they're trapped in this trench. They can't get out because it's in like no man's land, you know, like there's been an attack, it's failed, they're stuck in this trench. So the problem is they can't go forward because the Germans are there. They can't go backwards because they'll all get shot up by machine gun fire. So they're stuck in this trench. But this trench is full of demons and yeah. It's
my God.
Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds really intense, Axel.
So it's basically a choice of death or death. Like, it's really...
Exactly. Just choose the one. Which way would you like to go?
to die, yeah.
Naturally or naturally?
I know.
Oh, God.
So there are...
the one military, soldier genre one that I like that's horror that you introduced me to was actually Dog Soldiers, which we reviewed, where you got military guys or army guys going against werewolves, and it's also got funny moments in it. So that's a really good cross genre one too. It's very entertaining.
That's a good one. I recommend that to everyone. Actually, because
it's got good quality. It's good quality. It's not B grader. Not B grader.
Oh no, Dog Soldiers was a cinema release.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So it is really good, but it does have some very funny moments in it.
Yeah.
Has one of our favourites in it, Sean Pertwee. In a pretty major role too. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, that's a great one, and but it's definitely truly a cross genre because it's actually using a medium of werewolves to tell the story of British colonial Africa. So it's
that's right.
So it's a very,
cool.
very interesting. Like, there's so much more to that movie than just soldiers fighting werewolves. There's actual history and politics thrown into that movie as well. So it's very interesting, actually.
Yeah, it's really
Dog
cleverly
Soldiers.
done. Another cross genre that you and I enjoy a lot is when it first came out, people were calling it the horror documentary, but now we call it found footage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have the Blair Witch Project to thank that ball rolling. Blair Witch Project probably wasn't the first, but they're the ones that really got that whole found footage genre kickstarted. And now you have Paranormal Activities franchise, the VHS franchise, which I really like. And also our favorite Norwegian found footage film,
Troll Hunter.
Troll Hunter. So I really like that genre. I think it's a lot of fun because unfortunately nowadays the formula is always when you find the found footage, that means everybody in the found footage is most likely dead. But so you're actually watching to find out how they died, and it's always in a horror/supernatural kind of way. But I still like this genre. I don't think it's quite stale yet.
Well, I don't think we've talked about this before. I saw the latest Blair Witch recently, the new one, and I liked it.
Okay.
I went in with not high hopes, to be truthful, but I really actually liked it. It takes the story to the next level, where we actually... I don't think this is giving too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it. I'll just say that we get a glimpse of what's doing it.
Okay, I need to watch it. I actually haven't watched it because I wasn't expecting much from it either. And I actually didn't really pay attention to any of the reviews because I just wasn't interested. You know how that is sometimes, like you just automatically decide you're not going to see a movie, so you don't look at any of the reviews, you don't pay attention to it. So I didn't even know what really people thought of it, but I always honor and respect your opinion. So if you say it's something worth checking out, I'll definitely go see it. Not go see it. I'll watch it online.
Watch it,
now.
It's online now. Yeah, that's exactly right. But no. I'd definitely say to anyone who was sort of thought, look, I love the original movie, but I'm not going to... Here's the thing. It's not a remake. It's not a reboot. It's just... It's the sequel to the original. It's just got exactly the same name. So, so it takes off 20 years after the first movie. So the main star of this movie is meant to be the brother of the girl from the first movie. So, so you've got to... So it takes off, and he basically wants to see if he can really finally find out what happened to his sister. It's so that's where the movie sort of goes. I won't give any more away in case people haven't seen it yet. Obviously, you haven't seen it yet, Velvet, but no, check it out. I think it's well. If you like the first one, you'll like the second one. But of course now this all plays with the idea that, of course, when we had Blair Witch and Blair Witch 2, of course you were meant to work on the premise that Blair Witch 1 was meant to be real, Blair Witch 2 was not meant to be real. Or you can go the other path and say Blair Witch 2 was real and Blair Witch 1 wasn't real, right? Depending on which... See, because if you watch the second one, it's meant to be the first movie is a movie. But if you watch the first one, then the first one's meant to be real and the second one's just meant to be a movie. But now if you watch the third one, the second one is just meant to be a movie. It's not meant to be connected in any way. It was meant to be a Hollywood production. So yeah, so
I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, gets interesting. But some other ones too, where two British movies, which sort of go down that path of From Dusk Till Dawn, is World's End and even possibly Shaun of the Dead. Maybe not Shaun of the Dead so much, because that is kind of just a comedy zombie film. But World's End, definitely, where it starts off as one movie and ends up... I mean, you've got basically a movie where you've got these group of old friends get together and they want to relive their youth, but the movie will end up being them trying to stop an alien invasion.
That one, that's also one where, like, I had no idea what I was going into when I saw that movie, because I just knew, this is from the creators of Shaun of the Dead, and I was hearing good things about it. But yeah, it also has that really strong tonal shift that really kind of comes out of nowhere, because you really don't expect it when you realize that some of these people are not what they seem. And then also there's all of those elements of comedy, as is common with those directors, that writer team. They always do a great job of combining all this horror with comedy. But then, like you said, we also have, I guess you'd say, sci-fi, because alien invasion.
Well, the thing is, remember, they're great sci-fi buffs. Okay, I mean, they're huge sci-fi buffs, so that sort of makes sense, you know. But definitely, World's End. If you haven't seen World's End, it's not only is it very funny, but it's just fascinating the way, a bit like From Dusk Till Dawn, it starts off, you know, as one type of movie and then ends up as a totally different type of movie. Totally
different. Yeah. I'm actually not sure how I feel about the very, very, very ending of that movie. I think I actually don't like the very ending of the movie, because for me, again, the tonal shift was way too strong again. So I was like, I can handle one tonal shift, but when they hit that third, very, like, towards the end tonal shift, I was like, I don't know if I can handle this this kind of shift. It's so stark. So, but no, it's definitely still worth checking out. But I think the ending leaves some people feeling a little unsatisfied. I think that's how I kind of felt.
Yeah.
A little unsatisfied. But that's preference. That's not because it's not a good movie. It's just movies affect us all differently.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is it's kind of meant to be a comedy as well. So
Yes.
Yeah.
The multiple genre film. Okay, we have to throw this out there. Here's two perfect examples. The most famous one would probably be the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because we got sci-fi, horror, comedy, and a musical, and even Phantom of the Paradise falls in that category as well.
Yeah, no, that's very true. They're very true. They do cover quite a broad spectrum, you would say, wouldn't you?
Yes. Absolutely.
Most definitely.
So those are fun. Those are fun.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, too, but there are some... are there other ones you can think of that are multi-spectrum like that?
I'm sure there are. I just couldn't think of them off the top of my head. But, I mean, there are definitely movies that have more than, like, two genres that squeeze together, too. It's just... But most of the time when anybody categorizes them, we'll usually lean on the two strongest. But, I mean, like, a lot of movies will have, like, sometimes, like, multiple genres within them. I noticed my list is almost everything / horror. So evidently horror is really easy to add to a lot of films, because it could be a jump scare, it can be gore, it could be a supernatural monster. So I mean, like, horror, sci-fi is really common. The Thing, Aliens, Jason X, which I would
Jason X, yes,
love.
taking Jason into outer space. That's But
and it sounds stupid, but it's so cleverly written. It's actually really entertaining. I love how they did Jason X. Horror crime, because a lot of the crime films, it's already horrific because, you know, people are obviously a lot of times getting killed or getting shot. But when they bump that gore level up, they can actually turn into a horror crime movie. So some examples would be Silence of the Lambs. It has some really gross shit in it. And then Seven with Brad Pitt and Yeah, where, that one, you're following this, cop trying to find the serial killer, and just all the gruesome shit they have in that movie.
No,
that's an interesting genre too.
Yeah,
I would.
Yeah, you can take crime and make it so horrific it becomes horror at the same time. Yeah, absolutely. And
there's no monsters. These crimes are being committed by humans, which I guess makes it even more horrific because there's that relatability of realism.
Well, that's right. That's right. Seven definitely takes you down that path. I think Seven is
gross. Yeah.
I know a lot of people have said they found Seven quite difficult to watch. But I think it's a good film, though. I think it's an excellent film. There are some which are obviously just blatantly obvious, such as, Cowboys versus Aliens. Now, how much more blatant could you be? The title tells you all about it,
Or there's even like the history horror genre, which, for example, this one I thought would be so stupid. When I saw the trailer for it in the theater, I actually laughed out loud because I just could not take it serious. But then I saw the movie and I was like, this is actually well done. And I believe it was based on a comic book, was Abraham Lincoln versus vampires.
Oh, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, I think, wasn't it? Or
yes. Yeah. That's it. And it's actually quite good. It's actually a really fun movie.
well, there's another one too, which sets, with the story, was it Pride and Prejudice?
Versus zombies. I didn't see it.
No, I haven't seen it either. But there's another one for you where it takes something that's historical and then makes it go absolutely nuts.
So some of that stuff can be really funny, can be really fun, and they're just taking the piss, obviously. But the as you said, the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer was actually done straight. It wasn't done as a comedy, and it's actually really entertaining. Sounds stupid as hell, but it's actually a really fun movie. So if you're in the mood for something different, that's a fun one to check out.
Without doubt. I mean, movies like that are almost like watching an expanded episode of Doctor Who.
There you go.
Because if you think about it, Doctor Who does that all the time. It takes you to, obviously a lot of the times they go into an alien planet or something like that, right? But there's a lot of times they go to some historical event in Earth's history, and they turn it on its head, totally turn it on its head. It's like, what really happened there is not what you think. It's like, they went to Pompeii. It turns out that was aliens,
Right.
There are all these different sort of, they play with that all the time. So, it's interesting when movies do it. I reckon it's kind of cool.
That also might explain part of the longevity and appeal of Doctor Who as a television show, because it's been going on for 50 years now, and because it is multiple genre when you really look at it. You've got sci-fi, you've got action, you've got romance, you've got comedy, and sometimes there's even elements of horror, because sometimes there's some really scary aliens / almost monsters. I mean, it's really amazing how they've melded all that together, and I think that's what keeps that show going.
Well, the whole idea when it first started, was it 1964? I think was it 1964?
That sounds right.
We was 64 or 65? No, I think it was 64. It was meant to be both. It was a kids show, which of course it's grown to much more than that now. It's watched by everyone. But originally it was meant to be a kids show, which was meant to do two things. One, it was meant to be horror for children, right? Which is something we hadn't seen a lot of on TV before Doctor Who. Now, horror specifically designed for children is actually a genre within itself. Yeah, there's lots of TV shows which are meant to be horror for kids. In other words, it's meant to be scary, but not too scary where it emotionally scars them. It's meant to be just enough to give them jump scares and things like that, but not enough for them to not be able to sleep at night. That's meant to be the idea anyway. So Doctor Who was meant to be that. It was I think it actually coined the term, may be wrong in this, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, was watching from behind the couch. The idea that...
I think I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, the children would be watching from, like, behind the couch because it got a bit scary. But the other thing it was meant to also do was to teach history. Like, this show was actually meant to have an educational premise. So it's one of the reasons why they, in the very early black and white days when William Hartnell was the Doctor, so many of the episodes, they would go back in time. They would go back to ancient Rome. They'd visit the Aztecs. They'd do all this. So it was meant to be educational, at the same time. But then, of course, it got really, really freaky when we started to introduce creatures like the Daleks. And then suddenly... The Cybermen. Yeah. So...
Oh, my God. This is totally off topic, but on topic. Oh, my God. That one episode where they had the fucking Daleks versus the Cybermen, I almost lost my mind watching that episode. It was so fucking exciting.
Oh... That was the Battle of Canary Wharf, where they were in Canary Wharf in London, and you just got the two of them signing off. One's going, "Exterminate," and the other one's going, "Delete, delete, exterminate, delete."
Oh my God! I was literally like, my heart was pumping. Seriously, I had so much fun watching that episode. That was just like, there was so much anticipation, and you're just like, oh my God, world domination! But then they start fighting against each other.
Oh, no.
It's just amazing.
But also very, very big, because of course that was the last we would see of Rose Tyler. That was her farewell. Although obviously Billie Piper would bring Rose Tyler back on a couple of other occasions.
Right.
She would be, she'd be back in a couple of other episodes. But it was I was going to actually talk a little bit about why Billie Piper. Actually, many people say Billie Piper actually saved Doctor Who, the show, because it was argued at the time that Billie Piper actually brought in a huge amount of young females into this show who traditionally didn't watch Doctor Who. Because
that makes sense.
If you go back into the really old days of Doctor Who, this wasn't a show that young teenage girls watched. But Billie Piper changed all of that, and so she was really crucial in making this show as popular, as it is today. And a lot of people can Billie Piper, and I think that that's not fair. She was incredibly influential in creating I think without her, this show just would be another science fiction show. It wouldn't be the huge icon that it is of science fiction, But I really am getting off the point now. But if you haven't ever watched Doctor Who, get into it. It's a great show, and it's still going. So be a part of the pop culture phenomenon. That's exactly right. So, and then I have to go into the woo. Sorry, I absolutely love that song. Love that theme song. Yeah. Here's one. As you mentioned, the whole horror made for children. There is that genre that is really in between, where it's not for children, but you have children or teenage protagonists dealing with a horror situation. One movie that I absolutely love, it's a Swedish film. It's been remade in America again. As usual, just watch the original one. That's the one worth watching. Let the Right One In. A young boy ends up befriending a young vampire. And we actually need to review that film for the show because it's really amazing. Ginger Snaps, a girl going through puberty, ends up getting turned into a werewolf. And also, this one's really interesting. Pan's Labyrinth. Wow. Guillermo del Toro. Okay. He's never afraid to put children in dangerous situations. And it's always interesting to hear interviews with this director, because he says, being a child is a scary time and you're constantly in danger as a child. So he makes movies about children in danger, basically. But really, Pan's Labyrinth, to me, that movie is actually rather scary just from the visual standpoint. And this girl in the movie is so brave. And
without spoiling the whole movie, I mean, just the visuals in it. If I was a young girl seeing that shit, I would have just been horrified.
Well, yes. Oh, well, I mean, to go back to what you earlier said, though, it is interesting, how much that whole vampire type genre. I mean, originally, you think about it, vampires they were like adult horrors. And it's interesting how now vampires, to a degree, it belongs to teenagers now. It's like totally shift where it belongs. Now you have this idea of good vampires. Like you can have good vampires.
Exactly.
It's changed so much. It really has. Now you've got movies being made about vampire high schools where everyone at the school is a vampire.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like they're like like the Bring It On movies, with the cheerleaders and stuff. It's like it's like Bring It On, but instead of making them cheerleaders, we'll make them all vampires.
They just drink blood bags. That's all. They just take donations. They don't hurt anybody.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Dear.
Okay, so. But the genre we're actually going to be focusing on for our movie reviews today is the cross-genre Western. And I didn't realize this because I'm honestly, when it comes to movie genres, one of my least favorite genres on the planet is the Western. It just does not appeal to me. I don't like it. I've barely watched a handful of Westerns, just not a genre that appeals to me. However, if you turn it into Weird West, as it's most commonly called now, instead of saying cross-genre Western, which is kind of hard to say, a lot of times they call it Weird West. If you turn it into a steampunk Western or a supernatural Western or a horror Western, I'm so there.
I think it works well. Like the Western just sort of seems to work well, especially with horror, I think. In my opinion, I think they definitely work well. But I have to admit, Veld, I actually do like a Western. But I don't like modern Westerns. I like the black and white ones, or I like the ones with, like Audie Murphy or John Wayne.
John Wayne.
Right? Because I liked it when they weren't realistic. I liked it when they were total fantasy, about the American West. With the modern ones are very real. So it's like, God, who the hell would want to live in a place where
exactly.
You're like,
exactly.
I thought that's what was so funny about the movie. What was it? 1,000 Ways to Die in the West.
That movie's hilarious.
Yeah.
I like that. It did really bad at the box office, but I liked it.
I thought it was hilarious, but
I did too.
But the problem with the modern Western is that it's too gritty, it's too real. It's and it's probably a lot more like what the real Western frontier was like, but. Although, in a sense, I do not believe that there were gunfights every 5 minutes in the West. Sort of thing. But it's most of it was just farmers battling, trying to eat out a living, and probably more people died of disease than they did of anything else.
Yeah, just bad hygiene, dysentery, lack of medicine, dehydration. But what a way to go. What a hard life.
I know. But I do love a Western where it's total fantasy, where it's like everyone's got enough to eat, the town's quite nice, everyone's in their nicely ironed shirts, and, you know what I mean. It's sort of like
exactly. Yeah,
I kind of like that a little bit more. It's like the family friendly Western, where someone's shot and they hold their chest, but there's never any blood. Because I think they're just fun. They're pure escapism, and I kind of like that. I'm a big fan of escapism in cinema, because I think sometimes there is nothing better than to actually just switch off from the world.
Absolutely. Yes.
Sometimes I don't want to be told a story. Sometimes I don't want to think about how this works in modern society, or the politics of this, or the ecology of that. Sometimes I just do want to just switch off and just immerse myself in nonsense, you know?
For example, the steampunk Western, a great example of nonsense is The Wild Wild West. It was a TV show, and then they made the movie with Will Smith,
Yes.
and I thought that was really entertaining. It was just this weird steampunk is a weird genre all on its own anyways, with this whole, like, futuristic, archaic technology. Like, how does that even work? And then you have, like, The Wild Wild West where people are fucking flying around in, you know, their own personal motorized flying vehicles, but then, like, the photographer is using a camera from, like, 1882 to take pictures, and
I know.
it's just a really strange mishmash genre, which I think that's really funny.
Although I have
there's actually. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, just to say, but I have to say, the movie Wild Wild West, I wasn't actually a huge fan of it, to be honest. I didn't really enjoy it all that much.
Oh, no, it's not good. It's not good. I like the concept, but no, I agree, it's not a good movie.
The other thing, too, is I honestly think sometimes Will Smith is, I'll just say, a little bit overrated. I don't think he's as...
Oh, you know, for me, Will Smith is box office poison. Anything Will Smith is in, I don't want to see. That's one of those actors I cannot stand, Will Smith.
Yeah, I was a bit scared you might sort of say, oh,
No,
I love him, but no.
Him. No, I don't get the appeal either. And for me, he's literally box office poison. It's to the point now, any movie he's in, I already know it's going to be a shitty movie. I just don't like him for some reason. He may be an awesome, nice, great person, but for some reason, as an actor, I don't enjoy watching him. I don't know what it is. I just don't like him.
No, I agree. From everything I've heard, apparently he's charming. He's absolutely lovely. And
so I hate to say that because he's probably a nice person, but yeah, for some reason, some actors you just can't stand, and that's my one.
but that movie for me was saved by the fact that it had Selma Hayek in it, and I will crawl over broken glass to watch a Selma Hayek movie. She is
Selma Hayek.
I mean, she is so gorgeous. She really is so gorgeous. But
yeah, she is.
But in saying that, she's incredibly highly talented. You know, she's a really good actress, but she's also a writer, a producer, a director. You know, like she's got movies in her blood, storytelling in her blood. You know, so but even forget about all of that. She's just great to look at.
Yeah, no, she's a very beautiful woman. Speaking of the cross-genre Western or Weird West, like actually there's one in the theater right now that a lot of people don't seem to realize is kind of a Weird West. I didn't like this movie. I saw it in the theater, The Dark Tower. Because you have a character in a supernatural setting, and he's a gunslinger, and it's quite obviously a cowboy-type character trying to help small towns in this weird world that's getting merged with our reality. That movie just sucks. I'm sorry.
Yes, it's it could even be said that there are a lot of stories, even by people like H.G. Wells and this sort of stuff, where many of them are actually cross-genre in themselves. They take people from a movie will start. What was it? John somebody other on Mars, you know, where the idea is you take a Civil War soldier and then suddenly you dump them on Mars. What? You know? So, you know, it's I don't know, but, you know, I don't know if you classify that as Western, you know? You know, oh dear. Although there is a Tracy Lords version of that, which is fantastic. Because I'm a huge fan of Tracy Lords. I'm talking post 18 years of age, guys. Don't worry. I'm talking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, post 18 and up here. 18
I'm talking
and up.
Post 18. No, I actually think she's very funny. She's very talented, and I don't know. I think she's in her late 40s now. I think.
Yeah, she's actually a good actress. She's one of those actresses. Every time she's in a movie, I never recognize her until I see her name in the credits. Like, she's really got that chameleon thing going on. Like, whatever character she is, whether she's playing a mother or she's playing a vampire or she's playing a nurse that's getting stalked by an alien. Like, I honestly, a lot of times have trouble recognizing her. She's just one of those actors. I think she really gets into her roles, and it like changes her physical appearance for me for some reasons. I honestly a lot of times have trouble recognizing her. I'm like, oh, that's Tracy Lords. Yeah. Yeah,
no, I think that is definitely a person who revamped her career. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd almost think she'd be one of the most successful people to have crossed genres in styles of cinema. To put
Absolutely.
it politely, I don't
Absolutely.
know if anybody has ever made a leap quite to the degree that she did. I stand to be
there's
corrected.
also Sasha Grey, which has gone down a similar path, but unfortunately the movies she's been in suck. But she's a working actress now. She's gone from doing adult films to doing mainstream films or independent films, and she's a working actress now who no longer does sex work. But some people get lucky. I don't want to say get lucky because she works hard to be an actress. But I mean get lucky as in, for whatever reason, certain people are allowed to change that career, whereas some people never seem to be able to leave it. People are always like, hey, weren't you in that movie? Didn't I see you?
Didn't I see you?
Why do you look so familiar?
Yeah, I know. Why don't you still have hair like that? Oh,
yeah,
Dory,
why don't you still have hair like that?
Yeah.
Why'd you stop doing that?
Yeah.
Well, because people have lots of different interests, which is why we have cross-genre films. We don't want it to just be a romantic film. We don't just want it to be a comedy. We want it to be a romantic comedy. At least you do, Warren, because I don't like rom-com.
I know. This is something that you're just going to have to put up with for the rest of your life now, Velvet. Is that, oh, Christ, Warren wants to do a rom-com. Oh,
You know, but
me.
if you like it, it's probably going to be a good movie. It's just a lot of the ones that constantly hit the cinema here in the United States are usually just so cookie cutter, so unoriginal, just not good stories. They're too predictable for me.
I mean,
or the female characters are portrayed as just bumbling idiots, and I can't relate. I'm not entertained by that.
I think the other thing too is that I think a lot of the better rom-coms are what you used to call, I don't even know if it still exists anymore. Do you remember the Hallmark Channel?
Oh yeah.
Where they were like direct to video movies or direct to TV movies or whatever, and I think they were actually better rom-coms because the women were often very powerful, and sometimes the women are more powerful than the men. But they tended to star lesser known actors and and all the rest of it. And I actually think they're much better if you really want to get into that rom-com. Stop thinking about Renee Zellweger and fucking Hugh Grant and all this sort of stuff. Just don't forget about all of those famous rom-coms. Start looking at that Hallmark style rom-com, and I think then you'll be surprised. They're actually kind of good movies if you get that blockbuster fucking rom-com thing gone.
I agree.
But
I agree.
One day I'll convince you. One day I'll get you to sit down and watch something.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite movies on the planet, like literally my top three, my deserted island, movies. Like if I could only take three, one of them would be There's Something About Mary, and I mean, some people could say that's a romantic comedy, and that is one of my favorite movies. So,
well, yeah, it is. It is.
Maybe there's hope for me yet. There's hope for me yet.
It is a rom-com to a degree, but it's actually more a full-on comedy that just happens to have romance in it. It's not
exactly.
like
I agree.
A rom-com is really meant to be more. It has humorous elements, but it's not a comedy. So it's, I mean, 1 minute it can be very, very serious. And then, even though all of them are exactly the same, they all go along the thing where two people who shouldn't really be together meet, they fall in love, and then suddenly something happens. One of them betrays the other, or they think someone's done something wrong. So they split up, and then they realize that their life is unfulfilled unless they're together. And then in the last 10 minutes of the film, they come back together. Every single one.
Cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Wow, cookie cutter is a motherfucker. Wow. I was bored listening to you talk about that. I'm just not into that genre.
But you think,
it's so predictable.
I know it's predictable, but so too is James Bond, and we still love going to see them. I mean, they're written to a formula.
And for me, it's the stalker genre. I know what happens in every single movie before I even see the movie, and I cannot wait to watch every new release that comes out in the theater.
No, that's exactly right. They're still written to a formula.
In fact, there's one that I thought it was supposed to be in theater, but I think it ended up getting straight to DVD, and it's with Nicolas Cage and Gina Gershon, and it's a stalker film, and I'm like, oh god, I have to watch that, so I need to hunt that one down. because I saw it on DVD at one of the big box stores the other day, and I'm like, oh, it's already on DVD. Okay, I'm gonna go find it and go watch it. I'm gonna go rent it online or something. But yeah, another stalker movie for me.
Excellent. Well, I think we should maybe move on. I've actually got a lot more movies listed here, but we have taken so long to get through this topic.
Talk about this forever. Yeah, we can talk about this forever. There's stuff we didn't even address. We didn't get to talk about horror fantasy, dark fantasy. We didn't get to talk about comic science fiction. We didn't get to talk about comedy drama. I mean, any kind of mishmash of genres you can think of, there have been movies made with a mixture of those. I mean, I love cross genre. I think it keeps movies interesting, keeps them from getting stale. But there's nothing wrong with a straight up action film or drama, etc. either. But I love cross genre films.
Oh, I totally agree. All right, well, we'll take a quick break from the Warren and Velvet talk for an hour. Oh, sorry, I meant the Cult Movie Show. Let's change the name of the show, Velvet. Velvet and Warren get together once a week and chat.
Then we'll start up with the celebrity gossip hour where we just talk about all the rumors we hear about all the actors and actresses that we love and don't love.
Oh, dearie me. All right, we'll take a quick break and then we'll start reviewing some fucking films. All right. We'll be right back.
Awesome.
It's time to get excited, short film fans. It's mini movie review time.
It most definitely is, and we've got an interesting one this week. So what did you find for us this weekend, Velvet?
All right, so this week our mini movie is from Canada, and it is called Clickbait. How appropriate in this day and age
I know.
of social media and smartphones, and so this is a short film. Only runs a little bit, about 8 minutes. It's written and directed by Patrick H.T. Doyle, produced by Mohawk Jingles, and it's actually starring Patrick H.T. Doyle in it. So it starts off with a man doing what many of us do as part of our daily routine now. You see him, sitting in front of a laptop, scrolling through his social media wall, and there's lots of very clickbait type stuff. And we're so used to seeing this shit now that we just kind of glance over it and keep on going. And that's why the clickbait has to be so shocking to really bring you in sometimes. And one of them catches his eye and he decides to click on it to show that, he likes that. He's interested in that. Well, the next thing we know, our protagonist finds himself waking up in a heavily wooded area, a forest, and he hears an ominous voice talking to him. And then you have to see what happens. So what do you think of this mini movie, Warren?
I quite liked it. It was very simple. It was very, very simple. One person performance, or two, I suppose, because you've got the voice. It's interesting. I suppose it's interesting in the way that it plays with that idea that who's controlling the clickbait. This is where this movie, it's like, what's the source? And the thing is that, I think we've all had experiences where we've clicked on clickbait, where we thought it was going to take us somewhere different. You've got the very bad experiences, of course, where it signs you up for something that you didn't want to be signed up for, or, or it's, I did that one. I clicked on a bit of clickbait, clearly, and I found that suddenly I was being billed $7 a month every month, and I was told by my carrier, but you signed up for this. No, I didn't.
Oh, my goodness gracious, wow.
And it was clickbait, right? Just simply by clicking on it, had signed me up for it. So, it's something you've got to be very, very careful about. But anyway, again, back to the movie, is that it's but it brings up that point, who is controlling it? And what if what's controlling it isn't human? Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So, and also this short film plays in perfectly with what we're talking about today. It is a little bit of a cross genre because we've got that sci-fi slant, but then there's also a little bit of horror. And
yes,
I don't want to promise too much, but I like that this also has a very strong ecological message towards the end there, which is I didn't see coming, to be honest. And then also a common fear of, I hope I'm not giving away too much by saying this, but what happens when technology becomes self-aware?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. When you've got two concepts, it's a little bit like, I think we've kind of given away who's controlling the clickbait now, haven't we?
Yeah, I apologize.
No.
It'll still be fun
it'll still
to watch.
Because you're going to realise that honestly within the first minute and a half. So I don't think that's giving too much away. But it's that idea that if IT has become self-aware, and it's not a bot sitting in Moscow who's creating clickbait. It's what if it's the web itself? What if it's so that's a very interesting idea, and it's also an interesting idea that it plays with the whole idea which we mentioned a little bit about with Soylent Green last week, Velvet, where we talked about like global warming and so forth. Now, if you have a situation where you've got one species on a planet which is at odds with the rest of the planet, like it's doing something which is going to change the entire environment of that planet. If you've got an artificial intelligence, who's it going to side with in this fight? And that's that's sort of kind of, once again, I hope I haven't given too much away, but it's an interesting concept to think about, and it's what this movie plays with. Who is an IT going to side with? May not be us. It may not be us.
Exactly. That's an interesting thing to think about, and this short points that out. Also, this just made me chuckle a little bit. Not that the short's not funny, but just conversations you and I have had, and also the one we recently had with Grania McDermott, the actress from I Know You're In There, when we were all talking about make sure you cover up the webcam on your laptop if you're not using it. That's all I'm going to say. It plays into the short as well. So yeah, cover up your webcam camera if you're not using it. If you have a laptop that has it integrated, make sure you always put a piece of tape or a little Post-it note over that camera.
Well, this does actually play with a little bit of that. Yeah, what's that movie? Is it, was it not a Tron?
Yes.
This actually does, I think, take a little bit from the idea of Tron. I don't want to say any more. I'll just leave it at that. But it does play with that idea. So if you've got this concept of a battle between the environment and between humans, you've got an artificial intelligence. It's deciding that it has to end a battle. Then you throw the concept of what happens in Tron, you'll get an idea of where this movie is sort of going. So I think it's very interesting. Definitely, I think there's a message behind this. I don't think this was done just for fun. No. I think there's definitely, as you said, an environmental message in this Velvet, which is something I think we're going to see more and more and more and more of, obviously, from now on. I think this is a topic now which has got, it's a little bit like through the 80s, the idea of nuclear holocaust tended to play or work itself into so many different movies and stories and so forth. Where now I think the idea of global disaster due to global warming is something that I think we're going to see more and more and more and more of, in art. So it's a very interesting topic.
Absolutely. Okay, so if you would like to watch Clickbait, you can go to theghostdidit.com to check out Patrick Doyle's website. You can also follow him on Twitter at PatrickHTDoyle. And also, you can find the short on YouTube. Type in Clickbait Movie to watch it. We'll also tweet the link during the week. And be sure to post in the comments or tweet Patrick Doyle that Cult Movie Show sent you.
Absolutely. No, definitely worth checking out. It's only about 8 minutes, isn't it, Velvet? I think it's pretty short.
Right, yeah. Strong message, short film.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, well, we'll take another quick break, and and then we'll be right back. Sorry, I just can't find the button. Here we go, and we'll be right back.
And I would sit there and play their albums in the album player all the time.
In the album player?
The Only Funny to Us podcast with brand new episodes every Monday night at 8 at onlyfunnytous.com.
All right, and we're back. Now, this is a movie which I didn't get a chance to write any notes down, so I'm going to hand it over because it's a very interesting story we won't bore you with. Let's ever say, if you've ever been caught running for the bus, that's a little bit like the way I felt. So Velvet, please introduce our first film.
Okay, so today, to kick off our whole cross-genre Western, we have a really fun, well, I shouldn't say, well, it's fun for me. I love this movie.
Yeah.
So I had to force Warren to watch it, but we'll talk about why we love it and maybe don't love it, because I don't know what Warren thinks of it yet. So this movie's from 1987. It is a cross-genre Western. It is I'm going to do slight spoilers. We're going to do major spoilers, because this movie's from 1987. This is a vampire Western, or a horror Western, called Near Dark, and it has quite a few big names in it. Just let me say, if you've seen Alien, you've seen quite a few of the actors in Near Dark that are also in this movie.
Yes.
It's directed by Catherine Bigelow, who is actually married to James Cameron, and that's why she had the hookup for the cast from Alien to do Near Dark. Okay, so what is Near Dark about? This is a really... I think this movie is so amazing. It's just so quirky. It's just, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's played very seriously. It has all the elements you need for a Western. You've got a small town, you've got pickup trucks, you've got horses, you've got people wearing cowboy fashion, you've got people using lassos, you've got gunslinging, you've got shootouts with law enforcement, you've got the small town law enforcement that's really kind of powerless, doesn't have any up-to-date technology to do like big manhunts. You've got vagabond characters coming into town, causing trouble, leaving town. You've got dive country bars. You've got, okay, this is how country, this isn't just Western, this is country. You've got a part in the movie where there's this dive bar, there's a kid in the bar. You got people yelling yeehaw. And like any good Western film, you have a showdown in the street. Now throw vampires into the mix and you have Near Dark. So a young, horny man in a small town where there's nothing to do named Caleb. He's out driving his pickup around. He's going to go get some smokes, probably grab a beer to drink, because it's a small town. There's nothing to do but drink and screw. So he sees a pretty young girl that's not from around here and decides to give her a ride. And when that happens, well, they start making out. Things get hot and heavy. She bites him and turns him into a vampire. So now he's been unofficially inducted into her family of vampires that he did not even know these exist. And he's struggling with the moral conflict of, does he kill to survive or can he fight his new vampire nature? And you find out this family of vampires, they drive around in these stolen vehicles with the windows blacked out, going from town to town, leaving just a trail of blood. This is Near Dark. So, Warren, what did you think of this movie?
I liked it. As it started, I sort of thought, okay, all right, we'll see where this goes. And the more and more it went on, the more and more I liked it. There is one thing I totally disliked about this film, but I'll get to that a bit later. But as far as the actual film itself goes, no, I really enjoyed it. It's a fun ride. It's that, as you said, that cross genre. I mean, in that way, this film is obviously set in, as you said, rural America, rural America. I mean, this is, but the thing is that the other thing too about this movie is it would only work in America. Like, this movie wouldn't work anywhere else because you could set this in the outback of Australia, or let's say in the far reaches of Canada, or somewhere like that. But it wouldn't work because it's only America that has these tiny little local police forces, like these sheriff's departments, right? Right. Okay. Every other country in the world has either a national police force or at least a police force built on a state or a province or something like that. So if something like this was happening, within 4 hours, they'd have SWAT teams. They'd have, you know what I mean? There'd be helicopters. There'd be 100 police officers there. It would be. So it works because it's set in rural America. I don't think you could you couldn't make this movie in France. You couldn't make this movie right anywhere else. Yeah. But that's why I like it, because that's why it's got that Western feel to it, that frontier feel. Right, so even though it's set in modern times, it's still the frontier. So I kind of I like that, and it works really, really well. The characters are really interesting. I mean, the other thing too is that what we've often seen now in a lot of vampire movies is that the vampires can often be good. We mentioned that before when we were talking. In this one, they're bad as fuck. They're really nasty, I mean, the other they see. I mean, yes, a vampire has to kill in order to feed, but the thing about this one is they seem to enjoy the killing more than the feeding. Like
they like to play with their food.
Yes, and they also tend to put it this way: if they only need one person to feed on a night, but these guys will just go and kill 5. Just for the fun of it. They're pretty nasty. They're pretty horrible. And it's so it makes some very, very interesting characters, because they're so bad. We, of course, do learn that we've got one person in this group of vampires who is good at heart. She's not bad compared to the others. And our main character, his battle... Caleb. His battle with... good versus evil, throughout the film. And it gets to the point where he's almost starting to embrace evil until it's suddenly thrown home to him, where his family are now at risk, where he realizes, no, I can't embrace the dark side. I'm one of the good ones. I can't do this. And and it changes around. So, no, I think it's fascinating. I think it's a great film.
Yeah, so this is directed by Catherine Bigelow, who I actually really like. And she has this really gritty style to the films that she makes. And if you're not familiar with Catherine Bigelow, you will be once I mention some of the films she's directed. The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, Point Break, Strange Days. If you've seen any of those movies, they're all directed by Catherine Bigelow. And I love that she's a woman in film. I feel like there's so few well-known female directors, and she's one that stands out as having that really gritty, like realistic style. Yes. She shows you a lot of really unpleasant imagery to really like elicit a reaction from the viewer. And at first the premise sounds ridiculous. Oh, it's a vampire Western, but just the gritty feel that she like just the visceral. I love the tone of this movie. I love how you really feel like you're watching a Western that has vampires in it. Yes. And they're not just. And when we say vampires, we're not talking about Bela Lugosi style Dracula. I mean, these are rednecks. These are hicks. These are classless white trash that has the power of immortality and bloodlust. I mean, they're sociopaths, and oh my God, okay, Bill Paxton is like the biggest vampire psychopath on the planet. He is so entertaining to watch in this movie because he's so crazy.
Look, but the other thing too is that for me, this movie was True Blood 15 years before True Blood.
There you go. There you go.
It plays with, a lot of these ideas about how vampires interact, what sort of life they would choose. I mean, it's like in True Blood. You've got a lot of vampires who are good, nice people. You've got others who are really evil psychopaths. You've got some vampires who are more interested in politics than they are in, anything else. It was one of the things I always found fascinating about True Blood until it went down that crazy path and we had shapeshifters and fairies and Christ only knows what else. It just got ridiculous in the end. But the thing is that this movie is it's almost a prequel to True Blood. It's
that's interesting.
To some degrees, because just it makes you wonder. Were these people evil before they became vampires, or is living the life of a vampire made them evil?
That's a great question. And you know what? I actually was wondering about that in a different way, because like when I was watching the movie, so you have the characters, you have Caleb, our main protagonist, our human who gets turned. You have May, who I love her character because she does have kind of that innocence, naivete to her, and she really doesn't seem to kill for the sake of killing or for fun. She's like, I'm a vampire and I have to drink blood, and unfortunately I have to hunt. So like she's not into the whole overkill aspect of it. But then you have Lance Henriksen, who is like the main leader. They call him, basically he's kind of like the dad. And I was debating, I was like, okay, he's definitely the leader. I think he's the one that started this group. So then there's Diamondback, which is like his main squeeze, his woman. But then she had maternal instincts. So she sired the little boy vampire. Yes, we have a child vampire, people. Yes. You have a big man in a little body, unfortunately. So we don't know how old any of these vampires are, but you have the feeling that Homer's in that shitty situation that he can live forever and he's never going to age and he's always going to be in the body of a child. So that has interesting storyline in the movie. So I figured she sired him so she could have a child. But I was like, okay, who the fuck sired Bill Paxton? And what was he like when he was human? Because he is such a psychopath in this. He wears fucking spurs on his boots that are razor sharp, and he kicks people in the face to like slice open their neck with his spurs to drink the blood. I mean, he is brutally crazy in this movie. He picks fights, he picks fights just so he can fight and kill the person, squeezing their neck, breaking their. I was like, who sired Bill Paxton? I was like, did fucking Jesse, Lance Henriksen's character, the leader, want to have a grown son? And I was like, what was Bill Paxton like? Was he like a crazy human that picked a bar fight? And Lance Henriksen was like, he'd make a mighty fine vampire. Yes. I was like, who sired him? Because he's so uncontrollable and crazy that I was just like, he could have his own movie with that character. Unfortunately, we lost Bill Paxton, which I still can't believe he passed away. That seems way too soon. Way too soon. But yeah, if you love Bill Paxton and you love vampire movies, you need to see this movie because wow. Scariest vampire ever.
Well, the other thing too about Bill Paxton was that he was always better playing a villain than he was playing. I'm going to say a normal person. I agree. That's not quite the word I was looking for. But he's always. You look at him in movies like Apollo 13 and things like that. He's a great actor. He's really good. But you see him as a badass, or if you see him especially in Aliens we were talking about before, where he turns into the scared self-survivalist. I mean, he always excels in those sorts of. Well, he always did excel in those sorts of roles.
Yes, absolutely.
You think about the roles that we best remember him for. It's actually almost the Psycho.
Yes.
To some degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's another movie where he plays a serial killer in what is it? Shit. I hate when I forget the name of a movie. It's
Shoot
my
Shit.
tongue.
Okay, everyone go to Google and look up Shoot Shit.
If you haven't seen Shoot Shit with Bill Paxton, what are you doing with your life? Darn it, I'm sorry. I just
such a great name for a movie. I actually like that. Shoot Shit. It's actually great. I love
I
it.
can't remember the name of the movie, but there's a movie where Bill Paxton plays a serial killer, and that's a really amazing movie. I actually want us to review that one, but when I remember the name of it, we'll review it.
Clearly, it's not
But
shit.
yeah, he's a good villain. Was my point. He's a good villain. Is my point.
But what is it? Lance
Henriksen.
Lance Henriksen, who I think is, who is great. He plays his sort of, head of the family, if you like, extremely well. Another person who I think plays villains better than he's just great at playing the villain to a degree. Although he was excellent in Aliens, where he's not the villain at all, he's actually the good guy.
Right.
Right. But no, he was great. But he played the father, or I shouldn't say the father, but the father figure, if you like, of this vampire gang. Because obviously this works on the premise that there must be millions of vampire gangs all over the world, who were sort of joined together as family. Maybe there are some who are loners, but there are others that are in groups. This one just happens to be a group who sort of travel around the country, I gather, so they don't get caught. The idea is they continually are on the move. So I thought he was very good. I did love the line where he's asked, well, "How old are you?" And he says, "Let's just say, son, I fought for the South."
And he goes, "The South?"
Yeah, it's like, what are you talking about? The South? Oh, the South,
and
right.
And then he goes, "We lost."
Yeah.
So I love that you never know how old any of the vampires are, and there's only that one hint from Lance Henriksen that he's been alive a long time. And he also looks really evil in this. I mean, he makes a good villain as well. You never hear the word vampire in this movie.
No, never.
And there's no exposition. I like that, too. They don't do the whole, there's always some asshole that's like, how do you kill a vampire? Oh, well, first you have to get holy water and you have to drive a stake through the heart. If you can't do that, you got to behead him. And, you can wear garlic and make sure you wear a crucifix. Like, there's none of that exposition bullshit. So they are operating off the facet that most likely you've seen a vampire movie before or read a book about vampires and you already know this shit. So I like that they're not recycling all that. There's no exposition. How do you become a vampire? And this movie actually even plays with a cure for vampirism, which I'm going to be pretty honest with you, I also don't like in this movie.
I think
so. That does bring... Yeah, but I do love the rest of the movie. I don't like the cure for vampirism in this movie, and I don't know. Well, it's such an old movie, we could spoil it, or we might save it. We'll just see how it evolves.
I reckon there'll be a lot of people that may not have actually seen this film, and
that's why I don't want to spoil too much either.
And if we have a look at, especially when when we said originally that how similar we find this to, let's say, True Blood, and if you think about how popular True Blood was. Maybe there's a lot of people that actually might like to actually give this a shot, who haven't
I don't
seen
want to
it.
spoil too much then either. Okay, we won't spoil too much then.
But I will agree with you, the cure, we won't say who gets cured and who doesn't, but let's just say a cure is found. And yeah, it is, to be truthful with you, kind of a pathetic way to find a solution. It's so simplistic. And also just absolute bullshit. It doesn't work.
Right.
I mean, look, the whole idea of a vampire is lunacy anyway. But well, I'm saying scientifically, the idea.
It's true.
All right. You talked about drinking blood for iron and for that's all. That's all one thing. But the idea that you are undead, in other words, you have reached a point where you've died, but you still operate. You're just that you don't age. You still now become immortal, but you need human blood. I mean, look, that's all just wonderful fantasy. The science of it is absolute bullshit. But that doesn't mean. But who cares? It's fantasy. It's meant to be that way. But the concept is they then try to put something real and scientific into the end, which is just bullshit. It doesn't make any medical sense.
I knew you wouldn't like that.
whatsoever.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm pretty easy when it comes to movies, to be honest. Like one of my biggest complaints when people watch a movie and they say, well, that's not very realistic. And I'm like, it's a movie. It's not supposed to be realistic. They're telling a story. But this is one of the few times where even I go, okay, even I can't get on board with that one. So the cure for vampirism in this movie, we won't spoil it for you because some people might really like the way they do the cure. But I agree with you. I don't like the cure for vampirism in this movie.
And also the whole idea that it's thought up by a fucking corn farmer or something. I mean, this is not thought up by hundreds of scientists studying the thing for 100 years. This is thought up in a split second by a fucking dairy farmer or what? No, he's meant to be a dairy farmer, I think, wasn't he?
I think so. Or definitely some kind of rancher farmer type thing.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that took me where a really good movie just went to. Oh, you couldn't have thought of something better than that. I
know. That's what brings down my score when we do our rating towards the end of the movie, or towards our review time. But it is a fun movie. Again, I really think they did such a good job of incorporating all these Western elements and then adding this horror element. Like my favorite scene in the bar, oh my God, where... Okay, they find the vampires find this dive bar. And like you said, they only need to drink blood every day. And at the same time, they don't even need to drain people. They just, need a couple sips and they're good to go. But what do? They find a dive bar that has just a couple people in it. And then they kill everybody in the bar and have fun with it. I mean, it's fun for them. Obviously, it's horrifying for the people getting murdered. And Bill Paxton, this is a really iconic scene in this movie. If you like vampires, everybody knows about Bill Paxton as a vampire in Near Dark because he's like the ultimate bloodlust vampire, picking fights just to, beat people up and then ultimately murder them. And then once people realize what's going on and that they're going to get killed and the way they're going to get killed, they're so horrified. And you can just see him laughing and just having a good old time. He's over there dancing, jumps up on the bar and he rips open the bartender's neck with the spur on his boot. And it's really intense. It's a really crazy scene. And it cracks me up because I remember a time in my childhood of actually being in a bar with my parents. I don't think you can do this at all in the United States at all anymore. So I think it's really funny to find a movie from the 80s where, children are not allowed in alcoholic establishments such as bars. If you're under the age of 18, sometimes 21, you are not allowed to be in a bar. And here you have this child vampire hanging out with his family in the bar. Just every time somebody gets murdered, he's just sitting there smoking a cigarette, dancing around, singing to the music. This is normal for him.
Yes,
he's not affected. Yes,
yeah. I mean, you're talking about the way they kill, the unnecessary deaths and the bloodlust that they have, and I mean not bloodlust as in they need blood to survive. I mean the psychopathic, murderous bloodlust.
Right.
It's almost like you take an analogy of, let's say you've got someone who goes hunting and let's say they go out, they shoot a deer, they bring it back, they cut it all up, and it's food for, I don't know how many weeks,
Right,
so
right.
It's part of, vegetarians, vegans to one side, it's part of that course of being an omnivore where we kill animals to eat them. But there's a big difference between that and someone who goes off with a shotgun just blasting away at anything that moves and then gets some weird fucking psychosexual arousal from killing something. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the thing is that these vampires are at that stage where, it's how they kill people, the interesting ways they kill them, how psyched out, how scared they can make their victim. That's half of the fun of it for them, which is, so,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, when Caleb first gets bitten and he's going through his transition of becoming a vampire, first off, he has no idea. They do not prepare this poor guy at all. They don't say, hey, you've been bitten, now you're a vampire. I mean, they don't tell him shit. All of a sudden, he just knows that he is really sick. And I love the way they do it because they almost do a comparison with like drug withdrawal, because he looks like a drug addict who's going through really bad drug withdrawals, and he doesn't know what he needs. He has no idea that it's blood that he needs, and you just feel so bad for the guy. So finally, when he gets some blood, he gets like high, like drug high. You can see that it's making him high and aroused. So it's like this blood literally makes them crazy. They can't be without it. They have to have it. But then when they get it, it makes them crazy. It's just, oh my God. It's it's a really interesting take on vampirism, because I think it's so much more gritty and realistic as compared to so many other films where it's just kind of like, oh, take a sip of a soda, except for blood. I mean, like they're just so casual about it, where here they have all that bloodlust, but not only just bloodlust like you said, but I mean, this vampire clan, they are like into full-on anarchy. They love to like shoot up places, burn shit down, make it explode, like just leave this trail of devastation in their wake. And it's really entertaining to watch, though, because you're just like, oh my God.
Well, I think this is where it goes back to that idea, like, once again, of where I'm sort of saying this is the prequel to True Blood. I really do believe that the makers of True Blood, that this movie influenced them. I really do think this movie influenced that show a lot, because the similarities between this movie and that TV show, they're too big. Do you know what I mean?
Interesting.
I really don't think this is an accident. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I am saying that I reckon that this movie has influenced that show so much.
It probably has.
Because especially we look at how this family operate, where, but what is kind of different though is the way that they've also started to bond into. It's like they're sort of finding partners. Which is interesting, where quite often in that sort of vampire-esque nature, because they live forever, and because there's no such thing as disease or any such thing, it's almost like there's a total sexual freedom within like the sort of in vampire movies, and of course vampires have always meant to be very sexual beings as well. But in this one it's kind of a little bit different, because they're sort of pairing off. It's like they've each chosen a partner, but Bill Paxton doesn't, because he's just the loner.
He's too crazy.
But we do see our young man, young teenage boy, your child, Homer, and we do see in this that he tries to find his own partner, but of course he has to find somebody who's a child. It's very, that's very interesting, the way that even with this horrific lifestyle but you know what I mean, that they live, they're still actually pairing off. They're almost like husbands and wives.
That makes sense to me, actually, the more I think about it, because it's such a lonely lifestyle, and the majority of humans are social creatures, and the majority of us do want to have a companion. Some of us want to have more than one companion, but for the most part, in their case, first off, they're living this lifestyle that so few people live, because they're vampires and they're not people.
That's right.
And then they always have a secret. So they want a partner that they don't have to, they can't go out dating, because then eventually they always have to be like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm a vampire and I kill people every night. I hope you're okay with that, because I really like you and I'd like you to be my girlfriend. It's like, so it makes
probably
sense to me
be
that
a bit hard, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. So it makes sense to me that they would all just really want that one partner who has that same need to feed on blood and just understand. So it's not, a big fucking discussion every night about, were you out killing people again? I thought you were going to cut back.
Well, it'd make it really, really interesting in that, like, if you set this movie today, in the sense that with social media, they'd be able to find other vampires. You could almost have a Tinder for vampires, Tinder hookup. Although of course it probably wouldn't work, because they can't send photographs of each other to, But
I like that this movie also didn't do that. They're not sure to what extent they're vampires. So they didn't do any of the whole, You didn't see them around crucifixes, so you didn't know if crucifixes affected them. You didn't see them casting reflections, so they didn't have them walking past mirrors or anything, so you don't know if they cast a reflection or not. All that stuff. They didn't have any garlic scenes, like in movies they love to test if somebody's a vampire by putting garlic on the pizza or something like that. They didn't do any of that shit in this movie, so I love that there's a lot left to the imagination. You don't know what their weaknesses are. You see them get shot. They don't get killed by bullets, but you do know they can't handle the sun. Stay away from the sun. Stay away from fire. Yeah, they cannot handle sun or fire at all.
But I like that. I actually like it when they remove the religious element in vampire films, because it always annoys me. This idea that vampires and Christians are somehow against each other, and every other religion under the face of the planet doesn't seem to have any problems with vampires, and vampires have no problem with them. It's just Christians for some reason, It's to me, I don't like it. I think I understand if you go back in time, 100 years, 200 years, and all the rest of it. You've got the whole idea then that the only religion people really who were writing all this material and all the rest of it, and then you go back into the real old world, Transylvania, where these stories all began and stuff, is that Christianity is the only religion there is. So it makes sense, right? Because there is no other religion. There are no Muslims, there are no Jews, there are no, there are no Shintoists, there are no Buddhists, so it kind of makes sense. But in a modern world, keeping that Christian theme, I think, is stupid. It doesn't work. And I think there's a great vampire comedy movie. Forgotten the name of it. I cannot remember now. But there is one scene where a guy holds up a Star of David to Count Dracula. And Count Dracula immediately covers his eyes and goes, "Oh!" And then he suddenly realizes what it is and goes, "Please find yourself a Jewish vampire." So it's which played on that idea. It's a little bit like. But this is a really interesting other point too, is that there was an episode of Doctor Who in the original older Doctor Who's, going back to Doctor Who that we were talking about before, where they have vampires. Okay, now they've had vampires in past in a number of different ones. Generally speaking, vampires are aliens. It's just another species that drink blood and have fangs and stuff. But they're always sort of portrayed more as aliens that we misidentify as vampires. But there was a very interesting one with the very Sylvester McCoy, the last Doctor before it went to a movie and then went to the new series, is that they're trapped on an island and they're surrounded by vampires. And they talked about the idea of a cross, using a cross to stop the vampires. And the Doctor actually makes the comment, no, it's not the cross that stops them. It's your belief in what that symbol means. And so they actually have because it's meant to be set in the 1940s, so they have a communist who holds a red star up, right? And he's able to kill the vampire by holding up a red star. Because to him, this red star, the symbol of communism, he's a devout communist, is just as important to him as a cross is to a Christian. And so he's able to kill a vampire by doing that. So I thought that was a really interesting way of turning it on its head, that whole idea of the cross, and so forth. I've never seen it done in another movie. I've only ever seen it done in an episode of Doctor Who, but I thought it was a fascinating take on that whole Christian thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Sorry. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and I was like, that was like really like, like the light bulb moment, like it's your belief. I'm like, wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful.
Yeah, so really cool. So I thought that was interesting. It was also interesting in this too that yes, sunlight is going to kill a vampire. That's about all we really know from this. It's that we do learn out that petrol and high explosives can kill them as well, apparently.
You can blow their asses up.
If you blow them to fuck, they ain't coming back. If they've been blown into a billion pieces...
there's a great scene, and it's also like a lot of times when you see posters for this movie or box covers for this movie, Near Dark, a lot of times they'll actually take that image of Bill Paxton, where Bill Paxton's character, his fucking vampire character, actually gets hit by a semi-truck and survives.
Yes.
So, yeah, the only way you can kill fucking vampires in this movie is sunlight or blow their asses up with some fire.
Yes. It's interesting. I almost expected that scene with the truck, and Bill Paxton climbing on the truck and all the rest of it. I was almost sort of thinking, oh, we're going to go all Terminator here, There's
a great story. This is Bill Paxton being a bit of an asshole, I think, but it is kind of funny that, when you see this movie and at the scene where he gets hit by a semi-truck, he's all fucked up, obviously. Like, half his face is ripped off, and it's really gross looking. And they said that during takes, for that scene, there was a train that would stop by the area every night at the same time, for deliveries or whatever. And Bill Paxton actually went up to the train conductor in his fucking makeup one time and said, "There's been an accident." Yeah, he went up to him and said, "There's been an accident." And then he goes, "If you think I look bad, you should see the other guy."
Oh my God.
And Lance Henriksen has verified this story as being true.
He really did it.
Yes. So, terrible prank. I think that's really awful. And there's another story between Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton where they would be, on downtime on the set, when they weren't shooting scenes, but they were in full makeup. They're all bloody and gross, that they would be driving around in a car. And one time they got pulled over by a police officer, and the police officer got nervous and backed off and started putting his hand on his weapon and let the guys go without giving them a ticket for speeding. Like, they made him very nervous. Like, he had no idea they were acting in a movie. So I can only imagine.
God. Oh my God. Practical jokes and It reminds me of I've seen a YouTube thing of a practical joke that some kids play on their father in the United States, and it's basically a practical joke that goes totally wrong, but what it brings out is how much of a amazing guy their father is. They didn't get the reaction they wanted. I'll just quickly tell you. It's really quick. It's fascinating if you want to look it up. And what they do is they put a video. They father's watching television, right? And anyway, and then when he goes to get a drink or they distract him or whatever, and they put in a video cassette or some such thing, right? And it starts, and so suddenly, as far as he's concerned, it cuts into the emergency broadcast service of basically the United States is under attack. Nuclear missiles hit, and they're listing Washington is hit, New York is hit. We have incoming coming, right? And the alarm's sort of going, bam, bam, 3-minute warning, take cover,
God.
Right? And they wanted to get the reaction of their father, they wanted to get him freaking out. But what the father does, he doesn't freak out at all. He stays totally calm, stands up, and he says, right, okay, everyone's here, I've got to go and get Nancy or whatever. And he runs across the street to make sure the neighbours are safe. And he takes the neighbours out of the house and pulls, and it's like, and they're all there going, this wasn't meant to happen. We were just meant to freak our dad out. We weren't meant to turn our dad into, Mother Teresa. Who's trying to...
Oh, my God.
And the father's there trying to save the entire neighbourhood. It's...
Oh, my goodness gracious.
That's it,
wow.
Yeah, when practical jokes go wrong. Did you think about Bill Paxton doing something like that? You think about what could have happened.
That's really terrible. That's what I'm saying. That's really not cool at all.
No, it's like, oh, God. Yeah, Yeah, anyway.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Anyway,
wow.
All right. Well, I suppose if we're going to rate this one, because we've still got another movie to go, where do you reckon we're going to put Near Dark?
Okay, before I rate this, I actually just found this online. I think this is really cool. So, Dread Vision is honoring Bill Paxton by screening Near Dark in a theater in Texas. This is going to be at the Alamo Drafthouse Cinema in Richardson, Texas, and they're doing this Tuesday, September 12th at 9 p.m. So you can actually see Near Dark on the big screen if you live in Richardson, Texas. So I think that's actually really cool. So I'm going to tweet that out during the week. Yeah, I'm going to tweet that out during the week. Yeah, that's really cool.
So for any listeners who are in Texas, there you go. I don't even know where Richardson is, but
okay, Richardson is close to Dallas.
Right, okay.
Like anybody who lives in that area will know, but I'll just say it's close to Dallas, Texas.
Right.
So that would be the next big city.
Right. Okay.
Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
There we go. All right, that's very cool. All right. Okay, rating. Yeah, I really love this movie. So, like, I actually watched it again. Like, I watched it recently, and I remember seeing it as a kid, and then I actually rewatched it this week because I was like, I like it so much. I was like, oh, I want to watch it again. So, just because I love Bill Paxton in this movie.
Yes.
He's so crazy. He is so entertaining to watch. He's one of those crazy bad guys that he is so horrible, so horrendous, but he's so entertaining to watch because you're just in shock. You're just like, God, he's so terrible. What a horrible person, but I can't stop watching. Again, I love how they really got all the elements of what makes a Western, including there's a big shootout at a hotel against law enforcement. I mean, it's just, and the horror and I really love this movie, but I don't like that they have a cure for vampirism in this movie. And it's not what you guys think. It's we're not talking about sunlight. We're not talking about blowing them up. We're not talking about fire. Something else, totally cure vampirism.
Yeah.
That doesn't ruin the movie for me, but I don't like it. But I am glad they do it towards the end of the movie, so it's not like a running theme through the movie. But all being said, check it out if you haven't seen it. Out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to give this 4 Eric Roberts.
Okay. I agree. The medical side of this, the cure of vampirism, if I said that right, totally ludicrous, and it did spoil it for me to a degree. Once again, I loved, like as I said, this movie could only be made in the United States. I don't know if there's any other country it really could be made in, and that's why. But that's not a criticism. I'm saying that's good. It works.
Yeah.
Right. That it works. That's that whole Western thing, so that really works well. And I love that about it. I love the idea too that the vampires are very much more of a modern take of vampires rather than a more traditional sort of style. And also, as we said, way ahead of this modern vampire thing that we've got today, or at least we've had for the last 10 years or so. This movie is, 1987? It's miles ahead of where any other vampire movies were at the time. Absolutely miles ahead. So I really do like that. Cast is really good. Acting is really good. And you've even got a love story thrown in here as well. And the other thing too is that this movie is definitely about that idea of fighting your own demons, good versus evil.
Right.
So which side will you choose if you're put into a scenario? Will you choose evil or will you choose goodness?
Right.
Or as Maxwell Smart used to sort of say, if only he used his talent for niceness rather than evil. So that's really, really interesting. And I really like that dilemma, which plays out through the whole film. I'll give 4 I can't speak today. I'll give it 4 Erics as well. 4 Erics from me. I think it's very good.
Very nice. Oh, I forgot to say this before we started rating. Okay, I have to say this because I think it's so funny. Okay, so that scene where it kind of shows all the vampires, how they all have their different styles for how they hunt every night. So they all go their separate ways and then they all meet back together, to find a place to sleep during the day. But Bill Paxton, what does he do? He cleans up. He's got a button-up shirt on. He's got his good-fitting jeans on. He's got his hair slicked back. And he's standing off at the side of the road hitchhiking. And he's a good-looking guy. And what happens? 2 ladies roll up in a pickup truck. And he goes, I'd like to invite you ladies to a drink. I think it's so funny. Because I'm like, wait, what the fuck? Hold on, wait. Okay, these girls aren't wondering why this good-looking guy is standing off at the side of the road hitchhiking.
It really, it could have been taken either way. I mean, in some ways, it's really like the start of, one of those adult movies. The way that's sort of handled, it's like, hi, ladies, fancy having a drink. But that line is just brilliant. I'd like to invite you for a drink, which is just, it's such a great play on words, which is really good. So, no, I agree. I thought that was brilliant.
I love it. And just the way his character is the whole entire movie, because he doesn't just walk up to them and say that. He's like, he looks at them and goes, whoa, wait, oh yeah, all right. Like that kind of stuff. It's just like, he's just a crazy character. But yeah, watch Near Dark, people. If you can catch it in Richardson, Texas on the big screen, Alamo Drafthouse Cinema, you guys should check that out. That's pretty cool. That's a nice little send-off from Dread Vision for Bill Paxton.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I think, Velvet, if you and I didn't live in different places, I think we'd go.
Oh, definitely, right? Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
That's so cool.
All right. Okay, we'll just take a quick break, and then we will be back with our final film. And this is a real cult classic. Mm-hmm. Surprising we haven't done this one before, actually. So
yeah, and I'd never seen it before, actually. So yeah.
Now, our final film of this week's podcast. Now, this is crossover, as we said before, and a very famous cult film. It is from 1973, and it is the classic Westworld. And I suppose a lot of people might even say, why haven't we done this one before? Because it is a huge cult classic. So here we are. We're talking Westworld today. Now, as I said, from 1973, was directed and written, I think, too, by Michael Crichton. Stars, of course, Yul Brynner in a very iconic role. Basically, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator before anyone had even thought about casting Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. And we'll get to this point a little bit later. Of course, Richard Benjamin, who really is our main star, and, of course, James Brolin, another well-known actor. Now, it's set in 1983 at an amusement park, which you fly off to. And in this amusement park, there are 3 worlds. I don't even know. I mean, everybody knows this to a degree, don't they? Or I'll just, I'll make it.
I've never seen the movie until I watched it this week. So I feel like this movie was actually quite forgotten. Although it's cult classic, I feel like my generation's not very familiar with this film, but then they revived it with Westworld, the television show that's currently running on HBO based on this movie.
Yeah,
so,
but they
even do that summary, because there's a lot of people who haven't seen this.
Well, there was actually that's it's interesting you say that with the current TV show, because there's been more than one TV show. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in just a moment, though. Anyway, So anyway, it is set in the future. Yes, 1983. Well, remember the movie was made in 1973. Okay, but it's set in the future of 1983, where basically robots, cyborgs, have got to a stage where they're they're totally realistic, except for the hands. Apparently, they haven't quite got the hands right yet. I'm not too sure. I kind of find that just kind of amazing. They've got the faces okay, but they can't get the hands right. But anyway,
too many joints? I don't know. Dexterity, joints? I don't know.
The fact that you can get facial
fingerprints?
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, now on this sort of resort you can go to, there are 3 worlds where you can immerse yourself in the past. One is called, was it Roman World, where you can go and live in the old, concepts of, ancient Rome. The other one is Medieval World, where you can go and be like one of the Knights of the Round Table and all that sort of stuff. And the other one is Westworld, where you can go and immerse and live in a real Western environment. Now, apart from having the other guests who are actually at the resort at the same time, of course, it is filled with these androids. And the thing about these androids is you can do anything to them. You can have sex with them and you can kill them. And there is absolutely no consequences to any of this. So so basically these holidays are pure debauchery. It's basically sex and violence, because that's all you do with these androids. You either fuck them or you kill them. That's basically it. So it's a really interesting sort of concept in itself. Now, our main stars, Richard Benjamin and James Brolin, decide that they're going to go to Westworld and live, in the Western environment. And it all goes well. They have lots of, adventures. They have lots of shootouts with people, so they're blowing these androids away and all the rest of it. Now, it must be said that the androids can't kill you. So they might fire a gun or they have a sword fight or whatever they do, but miraculously, you will always win. It's just programmed, right? So the humans will always win. Well, it starts to go wrong, and basically the androids become, I won't exactly say self-aware to a degree, but they fight the programming, and so they start to be able to kill. And so we will end up with basically everybody, I don't think this is giving too much away, everybody on the resort will be killed except for one person who will be left alive, the actor Richard Benjamin, who will be tracked and hunted down mercilessly by a gunfighter, yes, Yul Brynner. And they will have, and so pretty much half the film is us getting to know what the place is like and all the activities and the fun they have. And then the second part of the film is this gunslinger, android gunslinger, hunting down Richard Benjamin. And, of course, will Richard Benjamin be able to defeat the android or not? So it's an amazing film. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Velvet, especially you said you hadn't seen this before, which really surprised me.
Yeah, I'd never seen it, and I'd only heard bits and pieces about it. So, I knew that there were robot cowboys in this movie was the impression that I got. I didn't know that there were three worlds that first off, I didn't know it was an amusement park. I didn't know that people have their choice of amusement park, whether they want the debauchery of ancient Rome or medieval times or to be a cowboy in the wild, wild west. I was highly entertained by this. The whole movie, I was laughing up until that last half hour when it gets deadly serious, because it is just a bunch of grown-ass men acting like little boys, playing cowboys and Indians. The shit was just cracking me up. And, you have the biggest geek loser on the planet gets to be sheriff of the town, and then this one horny old man gets to go seduce the queen in the medieval plays, and I was like, wow, you know what? This is some really gruesome entertainment, because people are like, kill him, and bar fights and gunfighting, and I'm like, these are grown-ass people that are paying $1,000 a day. In 1973 U.S. dollars, $1,000 a day is equal to about $2,423 U.S. dollars today. So $2,500 a day to go kill robots and have sex with robots. So it's a pretty outrageous premise. So the whole time I'm laughing, but that last half hour gets really exciting when the robots aren't going to take it anymore and start fighting their programming, and they start shooting back and start killing people with swords. And I'm not quite sure how people got killed in the Roman world. I was kind of curious about that.
Oh, they'd be stabbed. They'd be stabbed.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, because
they'd be using their gladiuses.
All they were doing was okay, because it looked like all they were doing was eating and fucking.
Well, I think the Roman world probably was more about eating and fucking.
Exactly.
The medieval world was basically eating, fighting, and fucking, and then
then Westworld was fighting, fucking, and killing.
Yeah. So
No, really entertaining though. I was actually really surprised that wow. Just wow. I haven't heard much about the current television series that they're showing on HBO. Some people told me it's a slow burn. Have you had a chance to watch this?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't actually watched the current series. But we should point out that a lot of people sort of think that there was the original movie and now there's the TV show,
which is what I thought.
Yeah, it's not actually true at all. After this movie was actually made in 1973, there was a sequel called Future World.
Oh,
which was the same was basically the same premise. It's just that they changed the environment. Then in 1980. Westworld, the TV series, started.
Wow.
And now we have Westworld, which started 2016? I think, was it 2016, 2015?
Yeah.
So no, this is not the current TV show is not just coming straight from the movie. They had 2 attempts before.
Okay.
So there was actually there was a sequel and there was an original TV show. So yeah. That shows you it's a bit like Planet of the Apes we spoke about. This movie has been done numerous times, both in movies, remakes, TV. It's one of those stories that won't go away. A lot of people find it fascinating.
Yeah, I was really, honestly, I have to admit, I was surprised by this movie that, it shows a futuristic society, like airplanes are practically spaceships, people are flying super fucking fast, robots are human-like now, sometimes you can't even tell the robots at all, it's only their hands give them away, so it got to the point when I was watching in the movie, I was always looking at everybody's hands, trying to see if they were going to be like a surprise robot, but then it just boils down to people wanting to be entertained. And I was honestly surprised that they were using robots for sex. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see them doing that shit today. And from what I heard in the current Westworld TV series, there's a lot of graphic sex scenes. So I was like, but I was surprised this movie broached that subject. Because for a lot of people, there's still a lot of moral debate about, is it okay for us to have sex with robots? If our technology advances that far, is it okay for us to make robots that we just use for companionship and for sex? And I was surprised this movie was just like, hell yeah, come on down, shoot a robot, have sex, it's all good.
Well, that's the thing. You think about how advanced this movie is. I mean, they're talking about set spots, which is something that we are now talking about in all reality. We're not talking about it in theory anymore. We're talking about the availability of these products and how real they will eventually become. Some of them, if you want to go and spend 20, 40, 50 grand on these bloody things, they're incredibly realistic. It's like, this movie is generations ahead, if you like, in its thinking of that. But I think the other thing that would have to be said is that how much do you think Westworld has influenced other movies? I mean, for instance, when you watch Westworld, are you also seeing the idea of Jurassic Park?
Mm-hmm, yeah, but that was also written by Michael Crichton.
Well, yes, I know, but are you seeing it sort of coming from there? Are you seeing Terminator?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because if you think about with this film where we've actually got Yul Brynner and Richard Benjamin's hunts, where basically the last half hour or so, they're trying to kill each other, hunting each other through all the various different realms, and in many ways, it's Terminator. You've got a machine. You've got a machine hunting a person. So it's very, very interesting, the parallels, I suppose you would say, that was just my thought anyway.
Yeah, Yul Brynner, the one that plays what they call the gunslinger character, the main robot cowboy that goes rogue, among other electronics going awry in this movie. I thought he was a very interesting casting choice because he doesn't look like a cowboy. He looks like a robot cowboy, where all the other robots look like people, like they looked realistic. But it was an interesting casting choice, the way they made him stand out. Like, he has those Eastern European features that just make him look, very clean cut. He looked out of place, but in a good way. It was an interesting casting choice that instead of, casting somebody like James Brolin to be, the gunslinger robot, that they did find an actor that had striking facial features and just that, what am I trying to say? He had that charisma that I like the way they cast him. I think it was a good casting choice. Oh, yeah. Because all the other robots, you were always kind of like, is that a human? Is that a robot? Where with him, you could tell like right away that he was a robot, but he didn't look like a robot. But you know what I mean?
Well, no, I agree. The casting's perfect because in a way, a bit like, Arnie in Terminator, you've got to believe that somebody who is actually a person is not a person. You've got to believe that they're actually an android or a robot or whatever. So the idea is, just as Arnie was so magnificent in playing that role of the Terminator, Yul Brynner is brilliant in this, in playing the role of an android. Because, well, as you said, because he is different to everybody else. So you can, where with some of the others you're not too sure, like you said, Velvet, but with Yul Brynner, straight away he's an android. There's no questioning, to that. So I did think that was well done. He was just perfectly cast. And
he really was.
And considering you've got an actor as big as Yul Brynner, I mean, people, I suppose, who were born, I don't know, who are maybe 16 today or 18 today or 25 today, they may not even know who Yul Brynner was.
Right, exactly.
But Yul Brynner was a huge movie star. I mean, he was huge. And also did huge amounts of work. I mean, not just this sort of role, Westerns, although obviously he's very famous for The Magnificent Seven, but of course he was in The King and I.
Yeah, and the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
So, and they say that so what I also like about Yul Brynner's gunslinger, like cowboy character, is that, first off, he's wearing all black, and we know in Westerns, bad guys wear black. So I love that he's supposed to, right away he's supposed to be a bad cowboy. But then also, from what I've heard, this is his appearance in this movie is also a nod to his character in The Magnificent Seven.
Oh, look, yeah, that would be. I could believe that, absolutely. I mean, I've also heard the story, Velvet. I don't know if this is true. That one of the reasons Yul Brynner was chosen was apparently, and this is something apparently which is kind of true, I believe. I'm hoping it's not clickbait. I'm hoping this is true, right? Is that anyone who, let's say, if you have a pistol when you fire, okay, once the pistol actually, let's say, fires, all right, you blink like a human blinks. Just the right?
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Now, apparently, Yul Brynner had the real ability, and this is what I've heard, the real ability to be able to fire a weapon and not blink.
Oh.
And the thing is that when you actually see him shoot the guns, he's not blinking like everybody else does, like any normal person does. And that's what also makes him seem very unhuman.
That makes sense. And since he is, exactly, he's a robot, he wouldn't blink. He wouldn't have those kind of reflexes when gunshots go off. That's cool.
And so the idea that Yul Brynner just happened to have this weird capability to be able to do it just made him perfect for the role.
That is perfect. I like that. I also, they do this interesting thing with the robot's eyes, and they especially utilize this with Yul Brynner's character, the gunslinger, is they have those kind of like mirror-like reflective eye lenses that made their eyes, like that helped that was a tell to help you realize they were a robot. Like sometimes you could look at the robot and see their eyes were had this weird mirror shine reflection to them. And you're like, okay, that's not a human. And also, Yul Brynner's programming, I'll say, did you notice that everywhere he went, he always had a cowboy stance? He would always, like, anytime he was standing, he always tucks his thumbs into his belt loops and just has, like, that cowboy stance when he's standing around. But, yeah, really well played. Really, really cool movie. And, fun fact, this movie was the first movie to make use of 2D computer-generated imagery, what we now call CGI. They use a 2D effect where they show the pixelation that's supposed to be what the gunslinger sees. They show these pixelated images. That's how they see us. They don't see us the way we see us. It's all pixelated. It would take them 8 hours to create 10 seconds of that footage. That's how long it took. And it was the first time CGI was used in film. Yes. And it was the first time CGI was used in film was this movie, Westworld. So pretty fascinating.
I suppose you think about it, like what we often see is that pixelated thermal image, which is now really commonplace, right? But you think about it, 1973, that had never been done before.
Exactly.
It had never been done before.
It's really amazing. Yeah, 8 hours to make 10 seconds.
Good God.
Amazing.
And when you watch the Predator movies and you just see hours of that, thermal imagery sort of thing, and you think about in this movie, it was taking them that long just to come up with those small little glimpses. Yeah, that is fascinating. But then, of course, this movie does then move into the realm, of course, of human versus machine. Like with our final sort of showdown, the idea that I don't think this is going to give too much away, that the machine still, although it's rebelled against its programming, it still has no imagination. It's still like the thing about Westworld, the movie, anyway. That these androids, they're not sentient. They're not self-aware. No, right?
Exactly.
They've just breached programming standards. So the difference is that they can't operate outside of what they know.
Exactly.
So, where, of course, a human, once they realise that, holy shit, this is a life or death situation, the human is still able to use their ability to think, to rationalise, which is something, of course, the android can't do, and we will see that throughout this chase, if you like, that the two of them have. Yeah, where Richard Benjamin is continually trying to outthink Yul Brynner. Rather than outfight him, he's trying to outthink him. And that's, outthink him's not the right, I think you know what I mean by that,
No, you're totally making sense.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating within itself, the way he tries various different methods to kill this or destroy, to destroy this android, and through sort of test and through experience and various things that happen through this chase, he finally realizes he's found a way to kill him. He's found a way to do it. And I won't say what that is, but he finds a way. So, fascinating movie. And, I mean, this is a true cult classic. I don't think you could say that Westworld is not, an amazing cult
and it's
film.
ahead of its time for when it was made, 1973. This is hugely ahead of its time. So, and I'm sure, since the most recent incarnation of the television series, that there's been, people went back and watched this movie, because I was like, I need to go watch that. I haven't seen it. And I was just like, definitely need to do this. What was interesting about this movie, too, is that you do not experience Uncanny Valley with this, that feeling you get when you're looking at a robot you're like, it's humanoid, but you get that weird feeling because it's not human. You don't get that in this movie because obviously all the robots are actually humans. Yes. But Yul Brynner still manages to pull off the spooky factor. And when you realize things are starting to go wrong and that they're actually going to start killing people now, I really like the bar fight scene. I guess I just have a thing for bar fights because I really like the bar fight scene in Near Dark, and I really like the bar fight scene in this one. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, they've got robots throwing people around and punching people. I'm like, how do you know who's who? Who's human? Who's a robot? Because they're all just like punching each other and fighting and throwing each other around, and it's just good old-fashioned fun. But I'm like, dang, if you got punched by a robot, I don't think you'd be having fun.
Well, I love the whole idea. We still have this idea that, it's like, oh, a good old bar fight, oh, it's good. Do you know how many people die in bar fights for real because they're king hit or they're punched in the temple or they're, it's like,
God.
It's actually something that we joke about in movies. You know how like people knock each other out, they hit each other over the head with a lead pipe and then the person goes unconscious and wakes up 2 hours later. I mean, in real life, you'd split their skull open and, these bar fights, we see them in Westerns, they're punching each other out. Do you know how, there'd probably be 10 or 20% of the people in that fight who would never wake up. They die of brain hemorrhages or, it's kind of funny the way we, through movies and all the rest of it, have built up this idea that if you hit somebody hard enough, you just knock them out for a couple of hours and then they're fine.
Well, that's just like slapstick, the whole slapstick genre in comedies where you're beating the shit out of people and for some reason we think it's really funny. But yeah, like you said, in real life, if you did that to somebody, they'd probably be brain damaged or dead.
Yeah. I mean, you look at you hear these stories about people who've been in bar fights and street brawls and things like that. In the movies, it's a bit like, oh, they just get beaten up, or they just pick themselves up, or they get knocked unconscious, wake up half an hour later. And in real life, hospital emergency wards are filled with these people fighting for their lives. But one of the things I did just want to point out, which I thought was where this movie shows its age a little bit, was obviously number one. You mentioned the money. Now, $2.5. So we translate. What was it? $1,000 US.
It's about $2,500 US today.
Now I'll put it to you this way: you catch the Orient Express, the train that goes from Istanbul up to London, right? And vice versa. Now that costs you a lot more than $2,500 a day. Right, I mean, and that's a holiday on a train, right?
Right.
The whole idea that you could go to a resort like this for only $2,500 a day. I would have said try $25,000 a day. You know what I mean?
I know.
That money is so wrong. That idea is so wrong.
Big time. Especially when you see like what they actually put into making these resorts happen, because like they have like they have a fucking cleanup maintenance crew every night that collects all the fucked up robots that got shot and beaten up or malfunctioning and need repairs. And then they have a hospital-like setting for daily repairs and maintenance of these robots. I mean, that alone would drive up the fucking cost of operating an amusement park this.
You send 20 people. You send 20 people there for the weekend, right? At $2,500 a day. $5,000 each, right, to go to this resort. It wouldn't even pay the salaries of the scientists and technicians who are working there,
right?
Let alone the cost of everything. I mean, it's just that doesn't make any sense, sort of whatsoever. But in saying that, hey, look, it's just a movie. But the other thing, though, which I think dates it a little bit, is when they open up the androids and we see inside them.
Oh, yeah.
Now the problem here is that, quite seriously, it looks like if you open up an old-fashioned transistor radio. Right. I mean, they're literally valve operated.
That's very dated technology. Even in like the control room where they have like the people that are constantly checking the programming and they're observing all the robots and they're making sure that they're following the programming they're supposed to do. What do they have in the background? Those reel-to-reel fucking tapes that I know. I don't understand how that works now. Like computers and reel-to-reel tape. But yeah, all over that room, just those fucking reel-to-reel tapes to run programming in computers, which just we cannot relate to at all technology-wise today.
No, it's and I think that's what's one of the things. It's like, but because it is science fiction, they're playing with an idea, which is exactly that. It's science, it's fiction, it's set in the future.
Right.
But the thing is, to seriously make this stuff work, you're talking about silicon-based electronics. You're not talking about.
Right.
I mean, you can't operate the idea that you're going to build androids out of fucking valves. It's just not. it's not going to work. But then again, they didn't know any better. It's 1973. What are they going to do? All they can do is pack a whole heap of electronics into a fake head and make it, I mean, what are they going to do? That's so I suppose I'll give them a pass on that, but I must admit it does date it now when you watch it,
Totally dated. There's a lot of attention to detail in here that I really enjoy, though. For example, during one of the sex scenes, oh god, I can't believe I'm saying that, one of the robot human sex scenes, there is while they're having sex, in the entire time in the background you hear gunshots because a bank is being robbed across the street because this is the Wild West, and somebody's playing a piano in the saloon the entire time, and it just made me laugh.
I know. It's, but I have to admit, one of the things I did find interesting is you notice the actress who was meant to be playing the android who was meant to be the prostitute, I suppose. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, her facial expressions in that scene are brilliant. Like, I don't know if you noticed that. And I'm not talking about the sex scene. I'm talking about, I don't want people to get the wrong impression of what I'm trying to say. I'm talking about the way that he's looking at her, getting all attracted, and the way she looks back at him, which is almost this like daze. It's almost like she's drugged up. But of course, she's not drugged up. She's an android. Like there's no, even though her mouth moves, her eyes move, all the rest of it. But the actress was able to actually just show zero emotion in something which is actually, even if it's just sets for set's sake, it's still an emotional task. It's still an emotional activity. And so she was, like, I thought I had to take my hat off to her. I thought she was, she carried off that role really, really well, Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Again, just the behavior of adults in this movie, it just cracks me up. I was like, adults behaving badly. Like when we first see the gunslinger, his programming is evidently for him to go pick fights at the bar, and I'm just like, wow. But what cracks me up is he bumps into one of our main protagonists at the bar who's having a drink, and he bumps into him on purpose, and then he starts insulting the guy. But what does Richard Benjamin do? He just kind of stands there like, oh no. But then his friend, who's evidently been to Westworld before, James Brolin, says, kill him.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, you just met the guy and you're going to kill him? Like,
but here's the other thing, Velvet. You would think that there might actually be a workup. Like when you arrive, they would actually talk you through the do's and don'ts of Westworld. It's like you wouldn't just be thrown into Westworld without knowing you can shoot the android. Like you would think that they would have told you that beforehand, But then again,
oh my god! And even on the ride there, the two friends are on the plane, and this is the exposition to set the viewer up for what's going on, what the society is like. Like his friend, Peter's asking John. Peter's like, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do that? Are they really realistic? What's it like?" And it just like a little excited child, just asking all these questions. And John comes across as the experienced older friend who's telling him all the do's and don'ts, and kill them. Here, let's go upstairs. And let's
I mean, but I think the fact is the movie has to be silly like that, because the problem is if you did it realistically, the movie would be dull, because they all know what they can and can't do. In a sense, he's not telling. I mean, what is it? James Brolin is not actually telling Richard Benjamin what you can do. He's telling us, the audience, what you can and can't do. It's just that it's being told through the conversations, so it's just an artistic...
Very cleverly done. Yeah, it's actually really cleverly done. It's really entertaining. Like I said, there's a lot of really funny stuff in this movie, but then it gets serious, and everybody gets killed.
Oh yeah. The other thing, too, is that, once again, we talked about, the concept of cult, about it being sent up and copied and all the rest of it. We did that with Planet of the Apes. Now, here you go. An entire Simpsons episode was a setup of Westworld. When the Simpsons go to visit Itchy and Scratchy Land.
I remember this.
yeah.
I remember that episode.
Now,
I didn't understand. Now I realize the parallels. Okay, I didn't know back then. Okay.
So because that episode is a total send up of Westworld. The because you notice they fly in the helicopter, they land, and then the Itchy and Scratchies rebel and go wrong and start killing everybody. And so it's a straight rip off of well, not rip off, I should say. It's a paying homage to Westworld.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's interesting in itself. When not just the Simpsons don't just rip you off in a one-liner or 30 seconds. When they devote an entire episode to your movie, you've got to say you've probably hit cult status.
Absolutely. A lot of funny things in this movie that, surprisingly for how serious it ends up being, and like all the moral implications and all, like the theme of human reliance on technology and what do we do when it goes wrong and we can't fix it. But there's a lot of funny stuff. So we got Richard Benjamin, or Peter. He's taking a bath in the morning, and then the gunslinger shows up while he's still. I don't think his program has gone quite wrong, but he actually tracks them down, and he's threatening his friend. And here's Peter Benjamin takes a bath, shoots a man. And I'm just like, wow, what a way to start the day.
Yeah.
Murder first in the morning.
I know.
And then also totally cowboys and Indians, the way that these men are putting on these really goofy old style Wild West accents when they're talking, and it makes me laugh. It's just really funny in the beginning. Really entertaining.
Well, I mean, here's the thing though. We look at it and we sort of laugh and we sort of think, oh yeah, people wouldn't really do this or whatever. But here's
oh god, yeah, they would.
But here they would.
Yeah.
Because you think of it, it's not really a big deal in a country like Australia, but in the United States or even Britain, reenactment clubs are huge. These people who all dress up and they reenact, in Britain now, they've got Roman reenactors and ancient Britain reenactors, or in America,
and there's also Civil War
in the United States.
Yeah, people have old school rifles with the powder and it's huge.
And they get together on a weekend and they fight little mini battles, and they live and talk and do all the rest of it, the way it was done then. So if you think about it, this is actually just adding the killing sets bit into it,
Yeah, and this is a lot like playing a video game, but actually being in there. Because, I love video games. And what do I always do? Oh, I'm going to kill that guy. Oh, I need to kill you. Oh, I got killed. It's like you just throw this vocabulary around, and that's just the reality of that game. And this is essentially just entertainment for adults.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. You imagine if you could cross a video game, like a battle type video game, with a recreationalist club, and actually have androids in it where you could actually really shoot them and they go down. I reckon people would be queuing up to do this sort of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my God. And but then I would have to question myself. That would be the new thing when you're dating people. You would have to ask them, so are you into the whole, amusement park, recreation, reenactment stuff? Okay, that's a deal breaker for me. It was nice to meet you.
Well, I think honestly, if I was to meet somebody and they sort of said, I'm a recreationist, recreationist, I go off we get together on Friday night and we all dress up and we go off and we reenact the Civil War, I'd probably say, okay, last drinks, I'm going. I don't find anything wrong with it because I don't want to have a go at people.
It's not for everybody.
No, it's not for everybody. I don't want to have a go at people who actually do it. And because the other thing too is it's just from a movie point of view, these guys and girls who do all this sort of stuff are crucial often in movie making. The amount of times movie companies use these people as extras, who basically come fully equipped and dressed, and that's it's absolutely amazing. I still remember hearing the story of Blackadder, the Blackadder series, and they did one when Blackadder tries to con people by building a pretend time machine. Well, it turns out the Baldrick actually makes a real working time machine, and they go back in time. and they end up at Hadrian's Wall with all the Romans and, you know, all this sort of stuff. And I actually heard the story that all of those people there were these reenactors. That's who they got, right? So they didn't have to do it themselves. They actually got all these reenactors. And
also, we're forgetting to say cosplay. I mean, that's also a huge part of the whole reenactment.
Oh, yeah. Cosplay, yeah.
So,
huge. Absolutely huge. But the funny story I was going to tell you is that I've forgotten his name now. Stephen Fry. I heard Stephen Fry talking about, because he was in, a number of the Blackadders, and he was in this one. And he actually said that when they were on set, he said it got really, really weird, because all these reenactors, like, it's a little bit like, he'd walk up as he knew this person was called Fred, okay? So he'd walk up and sort of say, "Oh, hi, Fred, good to meet you. I'm interested in what you do." And he'd go, No, my name is Martus Maximus. And apparently Stephen Fry's, "I thought you were called Fred or whatever, And he says, no, as of Friday night, I become," and they wouldn't even answer questions unless you spoke to them in character. Like, they took it that seriously.
They won't break character.
They wouldn't break character. Yeah, it's absolutely hilarious. Yeah,
that's fantastic. This is definitely, like, this movie's ahead of its time, and it's definitely something that, if it existed, people would definitely line up to do it.
Oh, I think so. Well, here's the question, because we sort of said, it's a bit like, if somebody, like, was a member of a reenactment club, maybe we wouldn't want to date him or something. But but let's go into the real realms of science fiction. Let's say Westworld or Roman world or,
medieval world.
If it really existed and it was affordable, for argument's sake, would you consider, if it was a real thing, actually, like, let's say you and your girlfriends got together and sort of said, "We're going to go there for the weekend." Would you go? You'd do it?
I would do it, because I would be so curious about the android technology. Because I really believe we're going to have that someday. I don't know if you and I will be alive for it, but I really do believe this is something that humans eventually will have in one form or other. And there will definitely be sex robots. I know I just know this is going to happen. But yeah, I don't know which world I would want to go to, though. I definitely don't want to go to the Wild West one. That one just sounds awful to me. I don't want to see people shooting each other all the time and getting in bar fights. I like it in movies. I don't want to see it in real life.
Yeah.
But then, like, the medieval one, I think I'm torn on that one because, well, I'm a woman of color, and I just don't really see a lot of women of color being princesses in medieval times, England.
But I think, but I think the whole idea of those sorts of places, if they ever do come to exist, is they probably rewrite history a little bit, where you could be a woman of color and be Queen of England. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I think they sort of they would let you do that. I don't think they would stop you doing that.
So I don't know. It would for me, it would be either a medieval world or the Roman world. Actually, probably medieval world, because who doesn't want to be a princess? So
yes, you'd be a princess. Yeah. That's have people treat you like a princess for the whole weekend. Have men fight for your honor and all this sort of stuff.
Exactly.
I can see how that could be entertaining, and then you've got all these guys that want to do their macho thing and actually fight for a woman's honor. I could so see it happening. Would I go? Here's the interesting. I probably, as much as I have sort of said I'm not into all of that, sort of thing that people do today, but this would be such an amazing experience to be. I probably would do it. I think to some degree I probably would. I think, though, I might be, and I reckon too that once you got into the whole thing where you could shoot people or you could stab people, I think it would become like a video game where I don't think you would actually. It wouldn't be, even though it's incredibly violent, it wouldn't be violent at the time.
Right, it wouldn't faze you the way real violence does.
True. Exactly. It's a bit like lots of people play very, very violent video games that don't go off and shoot people, you know.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
all right, some people have, but I mean, the vast majority. Do you know what I mean?
But on average. Exactly.
On average, you know.
Most people don't. Like, we watch violent movies all the time. You and I haven't gone on a killing spree. So.
Correct. Correct. So you know, I think most rational people have the ability to be able to switch off what is fantasy and what's reality. You know,
right.
and they don't let the two boundaries cross. So, it's an interesting thought, though. It really is.
It really is, and I'm just really curious to see how people will interact with androids once we get to that point of technology, because unfortunately it's going to become kind of like used cars. I think the best example of this is actually Blade Runner, even though I'm not crazy about that movie, but it just shows how like just that conglomeration of all this technology clouding everything up. But then also AI, remember that movie with Haley Joel Osment, where there are so many fucking robots, they're just having rallies where they basically just destroy robots, and people like enjoy watching all the different ways that they like burn them and blow them up and melt them just because there's too many. Like, they're being mass produced, then they get old, people want the newer model, and they just like abandon their robots. But these robots are operating off of their fucking programming, and they're just like, it becomes polluted. It's really I could totally see that happening.
I mean, for me, I actually see it more the way, I totally agree with, was it Neil deGrasse Tyson on this, where I've actually heard him talk about robots in the future, like how will robots probably really be in the future. And I think he's spot on with what he predicts, and that is that there'll be two different types of robot. There'll be the practical robot, which does menial tasks. It sweeps the streets. It picks up the garbage. It does jobs that we don't want to do, right? It'll pick fruits. It'll do, you know, all these things that we don't really want to do. But then they won't look anything like people. They won't be androids.
Right.
They'll be totally built to match the task that it has to actually achieve. Like, for instance, if you were going to make a robot butler, for argument's sake, right, who's going to bring you your drinks and do all this stuff, you wouldn't actually make them a humanoid structure because it's a totally impractical shape to be. You would make them a different shape to actually undertake the task of serving drinks or whatever.
That makes sense, yes.
Okay? So he said they're the practical ones, but he said the ones that will look like humans, they will be totally for entertainment purposes. That
makes sense.
They will have no other practical use other than entertainment. And in this case, something like Westworld.
Okay.
So that
makes sense.
Very. So I tend to agree with his prediction of robotics in the future.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I can totally see that. That makes sense. Wow.
All right. So if we're going to, how the hell have I managed to bring up Neil deGrasse Tyson in about the last three podcasts?
Well, we were talking about robots.
Yeah.
I feel like we always end up talking about robots in the future.
Well, how can you not? You know, how can you not?
How can you not?
All right. Well,
Westworld, a grim glimpse of the future.
So if we're going to rate Westworld, Velvet, how are we going to do it?
Okay, I was highly entertained by this movie. Like I said several times throughout this podcast, the first hour I was laughing, but then that last half hour there's that shift and it becomes tense, and you're kind of like, uh-oh. Yul Brynner is rightly so iconic in this role. If you haven't seen it, you definitely need to see it if you're a cult film fan. But yeah, it is dated, so that is going to knock down my score just a little bit. And of course, there's plot holes because it's science fiction, but highly recommend that you see this. So out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to give this 4 Eric Roberts.
Okay. That's a pretty good score. I'm going to go a little bit higher this time. I'm going to give it 4.5 because I think it's an amazing view of, a possible future. As in, we're talking about computerization and robotics for entertainment purposes. What I think would have been fascinating, though, in a sense, is that if entertainment had reached this level, where was robotics in their real life? Because you would think that there'd be much more money made in other types of robotics than there would be purely from entertainment robotics. But
right.
But anyway, once again, I'm trying to look too much into the politics of a movie rather than the real story. So no, I think it's a really interesting look at the future. Our use of robotics, how it might be in the future, but it's also just a really gripping story. You know, it's also that the hunt between man versus machine, being isolated and being hunted down. Now, that can be, in this case, an android, but it could also be in other movies a dinosaur, or it can be a Terminator, you know, whatever it is. So I think it's really good. So I'll give it 4.5, actually. My only problem with it is there's some stuff which is dated a bit because of when it was made. Right. So I'll bring it down to, but otherwise, I think if I was to rate this in 1973, I'd give it 5. But because it's now 2017, I'll give it 4.5 because we're watching it from 2017 eyes. So,
right. No, I totally agree. I totally agree.
No, so it's excellent. And I would say to anybody, if you enjoy the Terminator movies, give this a try because you'll find it very similar.
Yeah.
So give it a try. You know, give it a try. So, yeah. Oh, excellent. Excellent. I'm glad we did Westworld. I really am. I'm
now
really glad we
I actually
did
want to check out the HBO TV series that they've got going on because now I'm really curious to see, like, I know they've upped the raunchy factor on that. I know, because that's like the only thing I've heard about it is sex with robots.
Well, it's HBO, Velvet. It's HBO.
Exactly. But I am curious now to actually see how they've made this a mini-series. Because at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, what kind of mini-series, or not a mini-series, excuse me, just a TV series. What kind of TV series are you going to have based on this amusement park where people have sex with robots and shoot robots? I'm curious.
I think the TV show goes a bit further than that. It's not...
Evidently, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, the TV show, or the current TV show, is a little bit more complicated than, let's say, the original movie. Put it that way. But no, definitely say check it out. Check out the new TV show, and if you can hunt it down, you can find out the old Westworld TV show as well. And don't forget the sequel, Future World.
I'm going to have to watch that one too.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I haven't seen Future World, and after rewatching Westworld, I want to hunt it down now. I actually want to hunt down Future World.
Yeah, I want to see it too. I'm very curious.
Although I tend to think it's probably just going to be a cheap-ass rewrite of this movie set in the future.
Probably.
But I'll still be interested to see it. You know, definitely I'd be interested to see it. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much a wrap, isn't it, for number 49?
Yeah.
Wow, number 49. And number 50 is next week. Can you believe number 50 is next week?
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Wow. Okay. That is, I know. Wow, 50 shows. Can I believe that? That's amazing. That's amazing.
Time flies when you're watching movies and then talking about them.
True. Very true. Very true. Well, I suppose it could be said with this show though that what do? We talked about movies 10% of the time, and we talk to each other 90% of the time.
I'm okay with that.
So am I. All right. So, is anything else we need to mention, or we said that we were going to put up the link to the mini movie?
Yes, definitely. I've already tweeted that out earlier in the week. I'll tweet out again today, and So, follow us on our social media on Twitter. You can also find us on Instagram, but we're really more active on Twitter at Cult Movie Show. If you have a short film or independent film that you would like us to review, or if you just any film that you would like us to review, feel free to either tweet us private messages, or you can email us cultmovieshow@gmail.com with your request, and we'll get back to you. And take it away, Warren.
I think that's it, isn't it? That's everything?
I think so.
There's nothing else. There's nothing really else. So, all right, we'll be back next week with podcast 50, and we'll have to think of some really cool films for number 50.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Yeah.
We've got a week to think about that, Velvet. We've got a week to think about what will be the ones on number 50. So that'll be cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. And we, of course, will be back next week.
All right. Take care. Until next time.
No worries. Cheers, guys.